Yeah, she looks just like a kid that she is.
Then I can't
No,
give a summary of that facility stuff.
We gotta go vegan. How's
I can't
yours?
give a summary of facility
Okay,
stuff.
yeah,
I pulled up
either
the
one,
notes and
Good evening and welcome to the April 22nd meeting of the Board of Directors for the Ames Community School District. Directors, I'll take a motion to approve agenda.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Perez, seconded by Benkin. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Director Perez, will you please read our purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you very much. This evening, Superintendent Reisner is unable to be with us. She was called away on a family emergency this weekend, and while we understand that we have some important topics on the agenda, we certainly believe that sometimes personal things come before our professional capacities. So we are appreciative of the very capable staff that will be covering for her this evening, and we certainly wish her well. To start the evening off, we have a celebration tonight, and I would like to welcome Nancy Blow, the Executive Director of the Iowa Association of School Board Officials, and Melissa Fetkether, who is a board member, and they would like to present an award this evening.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. I am very pleased to be able to present the Professional Leadership Award. This award is one of the highest honors that Iowa ASBO bestows upon its members. They are nominated by their peers. The awards are not just a measure of extraordinary deeds or a lengthy career. They are a recognition of those school business officials who, throughout their career and lifetime, have demonstrated excellence in service to their school districts, communities, and their profession. Awards are presented each year with an award recipient receiving a scholarship to present to a graduating high school senior from her school district, a plaque for the office, invitation to the next ASBO Leadership Conference, reimbursement for the next ASBO International Conference. Chris has served as a DE School Level Reporting Advisory Committee member. She served as a regional chair. She has shared her experiences recovering from a devastating fire in Burlington. She volunteers with new members and old members alike and has served as an official and unofficial mentor in hours of need, no matter how difficult the situation. She has instructed at the Academy for our IASBO members and has community involvement, including Kiwanis, choir members at the Presbyterian Church, and is a staunch Cyclone supporter. So on behalf of IASBO, I would like to present Chris Stensland with the Iowa Professional Leadership Award.
Thank you, Nancy and Melissa, for making the trip here to recognize Chris. We really appreciate your efforts, and we're very proud of you, Chris, on your peer-nominated award. So congratulations. I will now go ahead and read our statement regarding public comments during our discussion items, as well as our public forum. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school, others will state their name and address. Our first discussion item this evening is the food service contract. Stensland.
Good evening, Board. I'm going to very briefly just give you an update of where we are on food service RFP. When you're outsourced on food services, you must go through a formal bid process every 5 years. So we are up. We had our first thing 4 years ago, and we've renewed 4 times. I attached the RFP. You'll see that it is very scripted by the state. In fact, if we change one word in it, that we have to have that pre-approved by the state. So we received that RFP, the draft of it, at the end of January. We spent February going through the RFP and gathering all of the supporting documentation that goes out with it. We had that out. It was then sent to the state. The state approved it. We had it out on the street on March 21st. The state does require 6 weeks from advertisement. We had advertised in the Ames Tribune as required by statute, but we also then sent it directly to all 11 companies who have expressed an interest in providing service management company services in Iowa. We held a mandatory pre-bid meeting last Friday on April 12th, and I think it was, 2 weeks ago on April 12th. Time gets away from you. The proposals are due back on May 7th. We had 3 companies, Chartwell's, Lunchtime Solutions, and Tahair attend the meeting, and they did have to attend the meeting to submit a bid. We reviewed the RFP and the plans for the new high school, and we toured the high school and Fellows Cafeteria. They had until the next Monday to submit any questions that they had, so the questions they asked at the pre-bid meeting and that they submitted after are attached with our answers. So I just wanted to give you an update on where we are, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on it.
Where do we go from here?
All the bids will be back on May 7th. We have an evaluation team that will go through a pre-approved rubric on assigning points to the bids, and depending on the outcome of the scores of that rubric, we may ask the top 2 companies to come in and do a presentation and maybe bring us food. And then once we have a selection, that committee has made a selection, they'll make a recommendation to the board, which would come hopefully the 2nd meeting in May.
Thank you.
I would just suggest that if we do ask them to bring in food, that they not necessarily bring it to us to taste, but actually set up maybe something at the high school, middle school, or elementary and have the kids taste.
That's a great idea.
That is a great idea.
Great idea.
Because they're the ones that have to eat it.
Sure.
I'd like to get their feedback.
Sure.
In the discussions with them or with the questions that you got, is there anything that was identified as something about our district's capabilities that could be adjusted that might help with costing going forward? Like something where if we had specific equipment, it would help to reduce our long-term costs?
Well, we run a very, I can't say profitable because it's nonprofit, but we've run a very healthy program compared to a lot of Iowa school districts. A lot of school districts run in the red. We are not. We have a healthy balance, and we never have to worry about cash flow. I will tell you that obviously Chartwell's knows our facilities and knows our equipment, but the other 2 companies were very, very impressed with the high school operation. They couldn't believe how big it was and how nice the equipment was. So then when we started talking about the new high school and what's planned with that, they were really impressed. So the one thing they were curious about is whether we at some point would close open lunch at the high school. Obviously, if open lunch is closed, that means you'll have more participation and more revenues. So,
I know that we sporadically get emails from students about the utensils, the plastic use. Is that something that we can negotiate?
we did have an email from some middle school students concerned about the styrofoam trays. The main reason we went to those styrofoam trays is that they were throwing the plastic trays away, and that was very expensive. The high school at the end of March, they were waiting for that inventory to be gone on the styrofoam trays, but at the end of March, they went to the same paper boats that the high school has, and it's gone over very well. So,
The elementary still have trays, right? Okay.
yes, they have the plastic trays. They aren't
Oh,
quite.
everybody has plastic.
Just elementary.
Oh, those plastic trays. and
Yeah, they
then
don't,
paste.
the elementary
Okay.
kids don't throw them away.
Okay.
Any other questions for Chris? So we will look for this to be coming back to
Yes.
us once those bids are received.
Right.
Are there any comments from the public on the food service contract? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to the next item, which is the 2019-20 new money budget. And Jonas Michael is here, and Chris is also going to be speaking.
So we had a work session a couple weeks ago on what we're now calling the new money budget, which used to be called the superintendent's budget. Nothing has changed on it as far as the proposal that we'll be asking you to approve later in the meeting, but there were some questions about the administration reorganization at the middle school, so Mr. Jonas is here to speak to that.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Nope.
Not real well.
Not very well. How about now?
Nope.
No?
No.
How about now?
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
still better. All right. I was trying not to use my principal voice, but all right. So Superintendent Reisner asked me to come here and briefly, was the word she emphasized, share with the board and the community some of the restructuring that has taken place at the middle school and what our staffing and personnel needs will look like, but also touch a little bit about some of the changes that we're going to be implementing for next school year that's going to be supported by these changes in our administrative staff. So I'm going to take you back a little bit from the first phone call that I received from Superintendent Reisner, who asked me if I would consider coming back to Iowa and give back to the middle school in our community by serving as the principal. One of the things that she asked of me is to come in and be a change agent and provide recommendations for some sustainable changes that can take place at the middle school to help improve the educational experience for our students and staff. So after some discussions back and forth, I agreed to come, and when I first came, what was important for me was to get some feedback from our students and our parents and our staff about where we were in our current state as a middle school staff. And so from there, what I did was develop some focus areas that I wanted to focus in on for the remainder of this school year and going into next school year. And those areas that, after just kind of having discussions and doing some needs assessments, that I came up with and I shared with our staff are these 7 right here on the top. I'll briefly go over them: academic excellence, safe and supportive environment, organizational effectiveness, high-performing workforce, family and community engagement, structures and processes, and then overall leadership and vision. What I wanted to do was be able to take our current structure, which was 1 principal and 2 general assistant principals, and hone in on people who have specific skill sets that's going to help us move our school forward. So out of that came the new structure. I know that in order for any good school to function at high levels, we need to have really strong curriculum instruction and assessment. And so I wanted to be able to find an associate principal that excelled in that area, that was their area of expertise, and we were able to get that. And someone who was a former TOSA in the district and is now director of curriculum in a different district and is coming back to us. And then also focus on that safe and supportive environment. I know our students have shared with me on multiple occasions that though our school overall is safe, there are some areas where we need to do better for our students. And so also in working with our staff through some professional development, a series of professional development, we've come up with, we've done some surveys, we've done some work around culture, and we recognize that there's some improvements for us that we need to have as a staff moving forward. So I wanted someone that was going to focus on school improvement, culture, and also support the equity work that we're doing here at the district. And then the last one, just the organizational effectiveness. You know, the many things that happens to run the school on a day-by-day basis, a lot of that is unseen. I don't want to talk about all the nuances up here, but there's so many challenges that we face every single day as administrators to make sure that our building runs smoothly, and it's a safe place for our students. We have 1,100 students there. And the building itself is a huge structure, and our staff recognize that as well. And so from a supervision standpoint too, and just putting proper supports in place. And then the other 4 areas I will focus on as the lead principal, setting that overall leadership and vision, working with our community and families. That's important for me, and I wanted to make sure that that was an experience that our families had at the middle school, as well as making sure we have the right people in our buildings. I wanted to break down a little bit about our staffing structure. I'm sure any principal can come up here and talk about how they need more staff. My job is to focus on the middle school and advocate for the middle school. And so when I looked at our staffing and our support that we had outside of the classrooms, going back to last school year compared to this school year, what you will see is that we had about 13.5 staff members outside of the classroom that was supporting the overall function of our school. This current school year, we're down to 10. And I don't have the exact numbers of students, but from what I understand, we've grown in size since last school year. And next year, we're projected to have even more students. So our current 5th grade class right now is sitting at about 370. And between the other private schools and other districts that are going to feed into us, a very conservative number is that we're expecting about 390 incoming 6th graders next year. So we're growing in our numbers of students, and that's a trend that we're seeing throughout the lower grade level. So we're going to continue to get bigger. So our proposal for next school year in terms of staff outside of the classroom is to grow by 1 and make some adjustments. So there still will be cuts in other areas in terms of our support staff. So we're going to go from 4 instructional coaches down to 3. We'll add a behavior specialist. It was a social skills instructor that we had last year that we're going to try to get back in that format and add an administrator. We lost a counselor, we lost a social worker. So overall, we're adding about 1 staff member to help support a building that's going to be over 1,100 students. Some additional changes that are unique to the middle school. I'm in a unique position that I have 6 out of 7 board members that have children at the middle school. So you all know what it's like to have a middle schooler. And I would tell you, there's a reason why middle school is typically 2 or 3 grade levels. It's a hard age group. There's a lot of changes that are happening. And when you have 5 elementary schools that filter into 1 middle school, there's a lot of jockeying for social positions within the building. And so we have to manage that, and we have to help support students to be able to manage and navigate the middle school. And we want to be able to make sure that we have a lot of supports that are happening outside of the classroom to make that transition as smooth as possible. Another thing is that we have 8 buildings in the district, but 20% of the IEPs are housed in the middle school. So we have about 115 students that have IEPs, and those are labor-intensive processes, and the level of individual care that we need to put into place to be able to support students in the classroom and outside, that takes a lot of time. So one thing that has been clear since I've started is that our system is stressed. When I visit with the counselors, they're overwhelmed by the number of students that they have to see and the supports that they have to provide. Our administrators, it's a lot of work. When I first started, I was putting in 10 to 13 hours a day, and that's not sustainable for anybody, right? And so we needed to be able to go from just being able to survive and be able to thrive at high levels. And so that's where this recommendation is coming into. We're also adding teachers, so I wanted to make sure that that was very clear. This plan is not just about adding administrators and support staff members. Our teachers are very excited, especially our 7th and 8th grade teachers, that we're going from a 2.5 team structure to a 3 full team structure. So that will impact class sizes, specifically at the 7th and 8th grade level. We're making some significant changes to our master schedule. I'll come back to the table about that a little bit more, but we're close to the point where we can operationalize that master schedule, and that has been such a huge undertaking. I now understand why people don't want to touch the master schedule after doing that work for about 3.5 months. And our committee, that's made out of about 20 teachers, have been meeting 1 to 2 times every single week since the committee formed. And so we're excited about the work that's going to take place with our master schedule. Primarily, what we're doing is reducing the number of periods we have in a day. That's not a secret anymore. 9 is just way too many. So we're going to go down to 7. That's going to increase the number of minutes we have per period. So teachers are excited about that because right now we're functioning at about 41 minutes per period. And so we're going to increase to about 54 minutes per period. And so just like I think there's going to be a discussion about curriculum in a few minutes, you can buy and put new things in front of people. You can do, just place a bunch of resources in front of people, but unless teachers have the proper support, we're not going to be able to implement things with full fidelity. And so I want the administrators to be more visible and to be in classrooms to support teachers and to support students. And right now, just by the pure volume of students coming through our doors, parents, all of those things, it becomes very difficult to be able to provide the support teachers need in the classroom. Mental health, I think that's something that's been consistent across our district, being able to support students. I think what I would say from my own experiences, just working as a former counselor and also just seeing things across the district, it tends to intensify when it becomes at that adolescent age group. We start to see some harmful behaviors, such like self-harming and stuff like that. And so we have kids in crisis, and we want to be able to support those students too. Talked about the master schedule redesign, but there's a lot of initiatives that are happening and coming down from the district that we want to be able to support and do a good job at. And so you all know we, as a district, are going to be doing some PBIS work. And so one of those positions is going to focus in on that, critical consciousness. I'm really excited about our hire for that specific position. Comes with a wealth of knowledge, but be able to support the equity work that's happening at the district. And now we can have someone that's going to be an expert in that work and supporting the professional development for our teachers with equity and culture. MTSS, we're going to be doing some work with social emotional learning and academics, and that curriculum instruction assessment persons can be able to hone in on that. And I think there's no secret that we're an SS school. Every student succeed act, and I believe only 2 schools in our district, the middle school and high school, has been identified as an SS school. So again, having the right supports in place to be able to provide professional development, to be able to push teachers a little bit, and to be able to work through some of the systems that we need to work through. I think our structure that I'm proposing will help to really address all those things. So I'm gonna take myself out of this for a moment and just kind of talk about when I moved to Maryland. I actually moved to a middle school in my position, and I remember when on my first day during teacher planning, I was totally surprised by the level of support this school had. So there was 800 kids, 3 grade levels, and I get the demographics are slightly different, but there was 4 administrators, 3 counselors, 3 instructional coaches, a testing coordinator, behavior specialist, 3 student advocates, 2 security guards. And that's for 800 students. And I think about the structures we have in place for 1,100 students. I think we just kind of gone by with the best that we could, and I think that it's time for us to really address some of the things that the middle school needs. And so that's why the proposal came forward. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm sure you have some questions for me.
Anyone have questions?
By JCOs, what is that?
Juvenile Court liaison, so that is a
So we
position.
don't have any of, okay.
No,
Who's doing that job? Who's doing that work?
everyone. Currently, I mean, well, we don't have an official liaison, but, you know, we have students who are on probation, so it's whoever can handle that situation. Counselors make contact with our probation officers, administrators make contact with them, be able to provide that feedback that's needed.
How would you measure whether this was a success or not? Like, would you collect any data? Like, was it successful to add that position? How would we measure that?
I mean, there's a number of things I think we can look at for next year, which is doing a time task analysis. It's going to be really hard to do that, being that we haven't really collected that data right now. I'm hoping what we will see is a reduction in our behavior referrals, because by adding that behavior specialist, one of the things that I'm going to do is have that person trained in restorative justice, restorative practices. And so being able to address some of the needs our students have when it comes down to behavior referrals, and being able to problem solve and address concerns before they become a behavior issue. And right now, you know, when behavior issues happen in the classroom, it goes up to the administrator if there's a referral is being written. And hopefully the behavior specialist can intervene and be that middle person between the teachers and the administration, be able to do some of the restorative justice practice work that needs to be done, and hopefully restore relationships that were damaged, bring them back to the classroom, and maybe have a reduction in behavior referrals that way. I think hopefully we will see some improvements in our academic scores. We've been pretty stagnant in our Iowa assessment scores over the last several years, and so hopefully with some professional development, some feedback, being more visible in the classroom, walk-through data, hopefully we see some improvements there.
How would this work logistically speaking as far as a teacher? So is a teacher responding to 4 principals, or so if they have, how is that?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Sorry, I kind of talked really fast and didn't really talk through the structure. So right now, so the proposal would be that each one of the associate principals would be also in charge of a specific grade level. So they would also operate as a grade level administrator.
Gotcha. Okay, that helps.
Yeah. Which is why they're just focused on one key focus area, but then they also have the responsibility of that grade level.
Well, thank you, Jonas, for coming forward. Appreciate you coming to the Budget Committee and then out tonight. I do agree with what you're saying regarding the leniency, the way in which we operate is fairly lean within our district. So I appreciate the perspective. I mentioned during our work session that I do feel that at times we're not supporting our administrators enough, and I think this is a good way of looking at the culture within that building, trying to make some changes to help our students and staff become better. So I'm supportive of bringing this forward. So thank you.
I would reiterate the same thing. Thank you for coming and presenting this again. And I love what you're doing, and thanks for coming back to Iowa to do this for us. So.
I do want to say thank you. I appreciate you having to come and explain, why you want your administration to look the way it does, and that you were willing to do that, and I appreciate it. I also appreciate that all of the schools who asked for changes are really, I think, making the institutional changes that we know we need to make. And so, I really appreciated your point about, you can invest in this role or that role or this curriculum or that curriculum, but if you do not have the foundation to make sure it's being implemented or that other people can handle all of the calamity that goes on during a regular day, it's really meaningless. So I appreciate that you are, I think, all working together in consultation to provide the best learning environment for our students. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to say thank you too. I really appreciate you putting together what you need in terms of the tools for success and taking the time to come here tonight. That was very, very informative. Thank you.
I will add, I'll start with a thank you and then end with a question.
Okay.
I won't be that easy on you. But first of all, yes, thanks for joining us back here in Ames. But more importantly, for quickly, by utilizing the staff, incorporating them into what you needed to do to evaluate the situation and how to move forward, not only right away this year, but next year. I've heard great feedback that's gone very well, and this is a product of that. So thank you for the hard work, because I know it wasn't easy. Well, I mean, you described just with the master scheduling, multiple, getting 20 people together once a week is not an easy thing to do, aside from anything else. But I'll end with a question, and maybe it's a question that is maybe a misunderstanding when you proposed, adding the additional associate principal, and some people thought, oh, that's one more administrator that's going to be running around, running the meetings, but not having contact either with teachers or, most importantly, students. And I myself have been saying, well, no, I think they're still going to do mostly that. But if you want to address that real quick, that your intention is we're not losing student contact professionals, we're adding.
Yeah, no, our building is adding teachers. What was more important for me is to make sure that class sizes were reduced and that we had a master schedule that was supposed. So right now, the schedule that we have in place was dictated by our staffing. And so in order for us to have a more effective master schedule, we needed to add more teachers, and Superintendent Reisner was very supportive of that. So that was my number one priority, was to be able to make sure that we had more teachers to be able to support a master schedule that we needed at the middle school. And then my second priority was then providing the supports needed to make sure that the master schedule was effective, but the students and teachers are supported. So no, and most of my day is spent with adults in the building and students. I'm not out in the community having meetings or anything like that. We're in the building. We're doing the work of the building. So I think any principal will talk to that. Yeah.
I want to say thank you too. I guess I didn't say thank you. I don't agree with it, and it's okay. I agree with a lot what you said. I just don't. I don't like it to be too top heavy. I feel like there are too many administrators. I just don't think it's good use of our money. But it's okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about just how wonderful the staff at the middle school is. And so a lot of the work that we're trying to put in place is to support students, but it's also to support our teachers. So, and I think they're deserving of that. And I would say that for a long time, I think our middle school teachers have felt kind of forgotten. And so we're trying to bring some more supports to be able to help do their work a little, and make it more efficient and easier for them.
Jonas, as part of this new money budget, there's a SRO, School Resource Officer. Do you know how that's going to operate between the middle school and the elementaries going forward?
All I know is that it's going to be elementary and middle school, but I don't know. I haven't been a part of any discussions just yet about what that will look like.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jonas, for all of your information. Thank you for your leadership in coming in a mid-year. We realize it is not the easiest time to come in, and we appreciate all of your work and your vision for helping us to make some cultural changes, but also some academic changes and improvements at our middle school. So thank you for your efforts.
You're welcome.
Are there any comments from the public? Oh, are there any other things on the new money budget? I know there are other things on it. Anything that you want to emphasize, Chris?
So we're not changing, the superintendent's not changing her proposals, but we would note that we had put on here 3 elementary teachers that we were going to hire that we would either use in place in the fall or else they'd become permanent subs. And we have already placed all 3 of those due to enrollments. So it is most likely that we are probably going to hire a 4th elementary teacher to have for placement over the summer, so that we're hiring while people are really in the looking phase. So that's the only other adjustment, but we didn't make it on this for tonight.
Which is why we have the $237,000 plus at the bottom as our net funds available.
Yes.
So we have that flexibility.
Yes.
So any questions for Chris on the rest of the budget or clarification? It's not changed since our work session that we had a couple of weeks ago. I just want to say, Chris, thank you for all of your efforts, as well as Superintendent Reisner, who's not here, but thanks to both of you. It's a tremendous amount of effort to do this, but also in your first year in the district. So we appreciate all of the work that has gone into this. So thank you very much. Are there any comments from the public on the new money budget?
Andrea Lowe, 931 Garfield Avenue. I just had a question. I don't know that it, excuse me, if it's been addressed, but about the middle school staffing, considering the mental health issues that we are beginning to see coming to light, especially in our district. Has there been any discussion about a student and family advocate at the middle school, excuse me, or a social worker at the middle school? I noticed that that position was not listed, and I'm wondering if that position is going to be filled or if there's any consideration for that going forward.
Thank you very much for your question. Any other comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the transitioning intramural 7th grade volleyball and basketball programs at AMS to interscholastic programs. Spencer Esslinger and Jonas Michael.
So while Spencer is getting the technology together, Spencer Esslinger is our athletics director and newly minted activities and athletics director. He's taken that role on. So he's going to share with you a proposal that we have for next school year.
Hi, everybody. I'm Spencer Esslinger. I'm going to briefly go through a proposal that we've put together over the past year to transition our 7th grade volleyball and basketball teams from intramural competition to interscholastic competition. So our current structure at the middle school right now is we offer 8 different sports to our 7th and 8th graders. You can see those listed below, all the way from football to soccer. Currently, 6 of those sports offer interscholastic opportunities to our 8th graders, while 4 interscholastic opportunities exist in 7th grade. And we're hoping to level that out a little bit with this proposal. Rationale behind this, and I'll talk about each one of these 3 here in a second. 1 is competitive balance, 2 is equity, and I promise it's not scary equity, but a few things popped up as we analyzed our programs, and then opportunity for our students. So the first rationale is competitive balance. We've had a lot of feedback from our high school athletic staff and conversations with them, hoping to bring volleyball and basketball online with the other sports that are currently interscholastic from 7th grade through 12th grade. The high school coaches have been great about talking to our middle school coaches and our middle school programs in general as just a community-wide, program from 7th grade on. And the volleyball coaches and the basketball coaches are a little concerned that we're missing a step competitively with our 7th graders participating just in intramural athletics instead of traveling and competing against other schools. On that note, by making this switch, if we look at schools of comparative size and demographics in our conference, like Marshalltown, Urbandale, Fort Dodge, they're all offering interscholastic opportunities to their 7th grade sports across the board. So I feel like we'll be closing a bit of a competitive gap by making this transition. Equity. This transition would put all 7th grade athletics in line with 8th grade, keeping the number of interscholastic offerings that we have equitable between the 2 grade levels. And then as we broke things down and took a look at things a little bit more closely, we saw that 7th grade boys currently right now have interscholastic opportunities in 4 sports, while the girls only have an opportunity to participate interscholastically in 2. And then between the girls' sports, for example, our 7th grade girls compete in cross country. They have the opportunity to travel and compete against other schools, but also in the fall, our 7th grade volleyball players do not. So they're missing out on that. In terms of opportunity, my gut feeling is if this transition is made that we're actually going to see an increase in numbers of kids that are going to come out to play. We have a number of 7th graders that are choosing not to play volleyball or basketball at AMS because it's not quote unquote competitive enough for them right now. Now we can argue whether or not that's a true statement or not. That's for another time. But what many are choosing to do is play AAU or club sports to fill that competitive need, or maybe their parents' competitive need. But it is hurting our numbers a little bit. So while that is happening, what we're finding is there's a number of athletes that we have in our district that are not able to afford the AAU and club fees in volleyball and basketball, which are pretty expensive. So they're missing out on those competitive opportunities that their friends are having that are playing AAU and club ball. So by making this move with interscholastic volleyball and basketball, I think we provide them a lot more opportunities to experience some of the things that their club counterparts are experiencing, which is the idea of the team bonding, getting on the bus, the travel. You know, me personally, all I remember about 7th grade sports is the bus trip, right? And that was the best part of it. And then competing against other schools. Kids like to compete. They like to play for the name on the jersey, you know, Ames on the front of the jersey. And making that step for these kids at 7th grade, I think would be really beneficial. So the big thing here with cost, kind of outlined what we have, what I anticipate the cost to be. Number one would be 0 additional personnel costs. The coaches are already in place. The intramural coaches are already in place, so we wouldn't need to be adding any new coaches for any of those sports, basketball or volleyball. We'd be looking at a one-time cost next fall of uniform purchases for 7th grade volleyball and the 7th grade girls and boys basketball teams. Currently, right now, since they're an intramural sport, they're just practicing in shorts and PE uniforms, t-shirts. So we wouldn't go all out. I mean, we're not going to be buying them Nike uniforms. But still, the cost is there, approximately $5,000 to outfit those 3 different teams. And you know, hopefully their numbers are around, we're hoping between 50 and 60 kids per team. So taking a look at things, the athletic budget revenue with our student activity sales, gate revenue, fundraising, along with the Booster Club, they've said they would commit some funds to the cost of the uniforms, so we'll be picking that up and should be able to cover that cost of outfitting our kids with uniforms. Recurring cost is going to be busing. That'll be the big one, of right around $4,000. We're looking at 12 trips between the 3 different teams, maybe 1 or 2 more added into that, and just a rough, and this is a little high average of about $300 per trip. So that's going to be the biggest expense, but I would like to say that our yearly transportation costs have historically, over the last couple of years, been under budget at the middle school. So I think it's something that can be absorbed with the current budget that we have. So that's about all I have for the proposal. Hopefully that kind of clears some things up, and I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Well, thank you so much for bringing this forward. I fully support this. I completely agree there's a drop-off in our ability to be competitive. I talk to high school coaches, they want to have those kids in there earlier. And I think the biggest thing for me is the opportunity piece. And so really, after you leave elementary school, there's a gap. And unless you have parents willing to coach, it doesn't get done. And so much of that's dependent upon people coming forward. Then also, I've had kids that want to have been on my team for club, and we couldn't offer because we were full. And so it's just hard to put teams together, and it's really an equity piece. So fully supportive of the 7th grade. I would actually like you to consider what happens at 6th grade too. I've heard from staff members and then also from students that sometimes the 6th graders feel isolated at times, and I think having more athletic opportunities for them would be a good way of trying to bring that whole school maybe closer together. And so I don't know, I can't remember exactly what we do for intramurals, if anything, for 6th grade, but just talking through how can we engage all of our students, I guess, in those opportunities would be helpful. So.
Yeah, that's currently in the works right now. There's been discussions about adding 6th grade intramural program, and I agree with you that those 6th graders do feel a little bit isolated, and I think our participation numbers would be through the roof at that level if that comes to fruition. So that is something that we're talking about.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that you brought up in equity this opportunity to provide all of our kids a chance to be involved in these activities. In a society obsessed with youth sports, I appreciate that our school district is willing to go out, and I'm with Luke, if there's opportunities that we can provide our kids, because those youth sports things are incredibly expensive and take time and a lot of different resources for families. So if there's any ways that we can provide all of our students to have those opportunities to learn about these sports, be competitive, be a part of team, but just to have that experience outside of the classroom is great. So thank you for bringing it to our attention.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions?
No, thank you for bringing it. It brings back memories of my childhood, not being able to. I remember I was a runner, and my PE teacher said to my mom, sign her up at a club because she's a runner. My mom couldn't sign me up. So it's that equity, like the money, like you said, it's really, it's important that they all get the opportunity. And I like the idea about 6th grade too. Yeah, I keep hearing about that. And another thing that I heard about, and I don't know, is it basketball? They play at 6:30 in the morning because sometimes they have a game. Is that?
So,
do they have to go that early?
well, yeah. So I think, and Spencer can speak more to this, because I was learning too, because, the proposal came up for 6th grade, and I was like, yeah, why aren't we doing it? And it comes down to facility usage. We have 2 gyms, and if you think about 2 grade levels practicing and competitions, and it's become a facility issue, being able to house all of the practices and stuff. So we're working through that. And so if we bring future proposals to the board, just remember this conversation, because it's soon to be coming.
Nice answer.
Well, thank you both very much for being here and presenting the information. We appreciate it. Any comments from the public on the information presented on 7th grade sports? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the next item, literacy adoption. Amy Lane and Company. What's that?
I'm going to do this on my own here, so if I look funky, it's because I'm going to. First of all, thank you for listening to this presentation tonight. It's been a long haul. It's been a lot of deep, rich conversations. It's been a lot of challenging feedback, but it's been a lot of a team approach to something that is necessary for our teachers and our students. So I'm really excited to share a little bit about Lucy Calkins' reading tonight, and I'm trying to keep it brief, but give you enough information so that we can move forward. I want to call out a thank you to Mary Morton, our amazing elementary principals who have been alongside me the whole way, as well as Director Jones and Director Cousins for their support. We had an incredible adoption committee and all those who gave feedback, not only in the buildings, but also here at the district office. I also would like to thank Dr. Deborah Reed, who we called on for consult when we were looking at materials. And I want to also thank the members of the Teaching and Learning Committee who supported the literacy adoption committees and gave that feedback that really made us think outside the box and challenged assumptions. So thank you for that. I'm going to start with an image. And this is a 1st grade student in the Ames Community School District. This student is described by his teacher as an individual who is hungry to learn, a budding herpetologist, also known as loving snakes. And he's confident in the Ames Community School District because he believes that he can shine here. And I have a brief video of that young man that I think is pivotal. So this is our 1st grade student, and this is the first time that he was able to read a sentence all by himself.
The book is in this on.
Play it one more time, just because it's so cute.
The book is in this on.
And I bring this video to your attention because with this young man, there was not one program. There was not just one resource that supported as an intervention. There was not just one high-yield instructional strategy that enabled him to read all by himself. The greatest piece in this puzzle that supported this young man was the unwavering support and the relationship with his teacher, Mrs. Jenya Coffey, who happens to be in the room this evening. And her belief that he could be successful and that he will learn at high levels. There wasn't a magic bullet. There was a lot of collaboration with teachers. There was a lot of looking and maybe failing the first time. But there was also collaboration from like-minded educators who never gave up on that young man. Bringing in Lucy Calkins reading is not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve all the issues for struggling readers, but it does start to lay a solid foundation for our students and our teachers as we move forward. So why? Why do we need this resource? At the heart of a guaranteed and viable curriculum, there is systemic alignment with standards, high-quality instruction, high-leverage strategic interventions, and systemic equitable resources. I was able to share with you all on Friday the multitude of interventions we have for both success as well as our special education program. We believe in providing high-quality instruction that is aligned with the standards, but also being able to make the instructional shifts that the standards demand. We also know, and I believe Jonas Michael brought it up, that we intentionally invest in teachers, students, and parents through high-quality materials and professional learning, and we support each stakeholder group through sound implementation, our students win. In a book called Reading Between the Lines, What ACT Reveals About College Readiness and Reading, it states that the greatest predictor of a student's success on any reading comprehension assessment is their capacity to read complex texts. With Lucy Calkins reading and the classroom sets, our teachers will have their hands on additional complex texts for our students and their instruction. So I want to start with where we want to be. We want to be in a state where we have early literacy with strong foundational skills. We want to provide highly aligned instructional materials for EK5, for ELA and literacy. We want a strong focus on teacher professional learning. We want to develop high-quality guidance documents and curriculum materials. We want to operate within an equity lens, not just in ELA and literacy, with all curriculum areas. We also want an established multi-tiered system of support for English language arts and literacy. And above all, we want to further commit to creating a culture of literacy for the Ames Community School District. I think this is the most exciting piece of this, is that this is a team approach to this adoption. As educators, we go through this process, and we need to remember to think about this. We are discussing one resource that will further support our students to read all by themselves. It's not intended to meet the needs of every student alone or in isolation, nor is foundations, nor are the multiple interventions that we offer for special education and success. So tonight, I want you to consider this a puzzle piece to a much bigger picture. This will merely support a stronger foundation for our literacy program. To catch everyone up to speed on where we are at in our current reality, in 2012 and 2013, the district went ahead and adopted Lucy Calkins' writing known as writing units of study, and that was 2012-2013. What we know about that is there were teacher leaders and instructional coaches and principals involved in a committee called QUILT. There was little to no professional learning in that initial rollout. It was left on buildings to develop their own PD to support the implementation. It didn't go well. It fell apart. We did a recent survey to see who was implementing Lucy Calkins writing in their classrooms. We found out that even without the professional learning, 65% of the people surveyed utilized Lucy Calkins units of writing 1 to 4 days a week without the necessary professional support. In 2017-2018, Foundations K-1-2 was adopted by the district. Last year it was implemented. This year we are in our second year of implementation, which consists of 30 minutes a day for all students, grades K-1-2. Next year we will be adding grade 3 foundations. We will do a kickoff this summer. We have already had 2 initial conversations with our grade 3 teachers and Kim from Wilson. We also have purchased the decodable texts for level 1 that will be rolled out in the fall of 2019-2020. That's the only level of decodable text that Foundations offers us at this time. Level 2 will be out in the fall. We know from the Foundations, the Wilson website, although Foundations includes comprehension strategies, it must be combined with a core literature-based language arts program for an integrated and comprehensive approach to reading and spelling. It's what we're trying to do is round out that picture for our students. We also know that there's multiple special education and success interventions available for our teachers to collaborate around and make sure they're targeted and intentional to meet the individual student's need. We also know that we have 0 alignment in core reading instructional materials within our buildings and from each of our buildings. Teachers are utilizing sites such as Teachers Pay Teachers, Pinterest, downloads, and other resources to support reading comprehension. We have no research to support those methods. We also know that buildings out of their own budgets continue to add stories that reflect our children. This was a big topic when we went through the literacy adoption process. They continue to seek mirrors, which are stories that reflect students' culture and their reality, and also help them to better understand themselves. They also supply those book rooms with texts called windows, which are texts that offer a different worldview and from someone else's experiences. I learned in a conversation with teachers that these are often paid for out of teachers' own pockets. With a Lucy Calkins classroom set, teachers will have access to these materials. And metrics. Thank you, Angela Shaw. One of the things that we operationalize, as you all are aware, are the formative assessment system for teachers, the FAST, as we call it here. Iowa assessments, this year it's shifted to the Iowa Statewide Assessment of Student Progress, the Quick Phonics Screener, or QPS, and IGDs. All of these are truly district level and building level that look at the health of a system through these metrics. Lucy Calkins provides class level and grade level progressions that focuses more on the day-to-day instruction. The students can even utilize these progressions, these assessments, to set their own goals around learnings. There's also a variety of common formative assessments at grades 3, 4, and 5. So there's multiple opportunities to formatively assess. So now I want to dig a little deeper into what the materials review and the recommendation process looked like and why I'm here today. The materials selected came from a survey that was conducted by Deborah Reed at the Iowa Reading Research Center that surveyed the state of Iowa and what was being utilized. The top 5 that we think best fit our needs and would align with areas that were very important to us were America Reading, Lucy Calkins, Fontes and Pinnell, Wonders, and Wit and Wisdom. These were under review 2 at a time from November through March in the buildings as well as the district level to get feedback from parents and other stakeholders, teachers as well. We narrowed it to 3 based on the feedback that we received from our stakeholders. All of these are supported by extensive research as quality resources for literacy. Myself and Mary Morton traveled to Iowa City to meet with Deborah Reed to go over the process for the selection and the Literacy Recommendation Committee. The focus areas that we gleaned on were equity, which is what our purpose is in our district, formative data and differentiation, authentic opportunities in literacy, complex and rigorous text, teacher professional learning and support, partnership with units of study and foundations, which currently exist in our classrooms. The committee consisted of parents, a representative from every single elementary school, a K-2 teacher from every single building, a 3-5 teacher from every single building, all of the major programs such as ELs, ELP, Success, Special Education. We had 3 of our principals represented in our committee, Steve Flynn from Meeker, who houses our Foundations Model School, Justin Jeffs, who houses America Reading Corps in his building, and Christy Mixdorf, who sits on our Literacy Task Force for our internal teachers and leaders. I think it's also that we commend our community partners that stepped up and sat at the table with us. Malai Amfar, who is from Raising Readers with the United Way, Autumn Long with Early Literacy, Dr. Noreen Rodriguez at Iowa State University. She's worked with our teachers on the summer looking at equity and literacy, and Dr. Sue Ahn, who's a professor of special education at Iowa State University. The directors that were present were myself, Dr. Jones, and Darcy Cousins, and we were non-voting members. The external facilitator, Dr. Jim Verlenja, who's kind of a legend in the Heartland. He's been in leadership for, I want to say as long as I've been alive, but that might be a stretch. We worked on a consensus methodology, and we narrowed it down to 2. The top 2 that came forward, or the top 3 that came forward, were American Reading, Lucy Calkins, Fontes and Pinnell, and that's what the committee did a deep dive into. The deep dive, as I spoke earlier, each individual had a rubric that focused on the areas that came forth as the most important areas for us to focus on as a district: equity, formative data, authentic opportunities, complex and rigorous texts, and supportive teacher professional learning and development. And also that it partnered, which was currently existing in our classrooms. We went through a deep dive for 45 minutes with every single vendor. We were broken down into 3 groups, and we rotated between each vendor. People were allowed to ask questions of the vendors, and if questions were not answered, they could forward their questions on to the vendor, and the vendor got back to us within 24 hours in time for the next meeting. And you'll see in your packet, I included the Lucy Calkins questions that were answered after the fact and the responses that were given. It was an 80-20 consensus was our goal, and we had high hopes. But I think what we learned is that the conversations that happened and the learning that happened through those conversations was much more significant than the vote that we ended with. We ended with a 20-12 vote out of 32 voters. So obviously, it was not a consensus. I think the most promising and powerful aspect of this whole night, that everyone on that committee, those 32 voters, agreed through a thumbs up that they would stand behind either program that came forward. And they believed that both programs would be excellent choices for the students and staff of Ames Community School District. As it turned over to the administrators and the directors, we too had some rich conversations. But at the director and principal levels, we went forward with Lucy Calkins as a recommendation that we would like to set forward to the board. And then we left it to the elementary principals alone. They too came forward with the Lucy Calkins reading program is what they wanted to put in front of the board for the recommendation to adopt. Lucy Calkins is a workshop curriculum, and I gave you information to read over the long Easter weekend. A couple points. There are 144 districts in the state of Iowa that utilize some form of Lucy Calkins. The learning is gleaned from decades of research. It was born in the New York City schools. Curriculum development, working shoulder to shoulder with students, teachers, and school leaders. And they commit to equity. They have a commitment to diverse learners.
Schools. There are kids who want to see themselves in the books and they don't. And this country has a changing demographic. The biggest thing we see when we go from city to city, but also in rural districts, is there's new immigration. And we are so lucky to have the kind of country that takes people in from around the world. We work also in some of the most impoverished places around the world. And it's a great gift that this country offers. But that means that we have to be careful to make sure that kids see themselves in the libraries. So you'll see that one of the things we thought about, and it took a lot of thought, is figuring out how kids from different ethnic diversities, cultural backgrounds, kids with different histories, kids with different identities that they're still growing into will be able to see themselves in the classroom libraries. And there's basically a few different ways they might see them. They might see themselves in the read-aloud books and some of the picture books, so making sure that picture books are not all representing the same kinds of families, but actually have a lot of different ways that families might look, a lot of different ways that kids might be growing up. They'll also see themselves in the independent reading books, so there's a sense that like kids can be looking through books and saying like, wow, this book feels like I could be in this book. And that is an incredible gift to give kids. And frankly, for teachers, it's really hard to take the time to do that work. And it takes a lot of reading because you have to read books and think, is this a partial representation? Is this a kind of representation that's actually not really going to be helpful for kids to see because this is a story that's a story of like hate or sadness? But instead, different ways that we can have books that really celebrate the incredible rich diversity that we have in this country and even the country that we're going to be 10 years from now. So one of the things you might look at when you're looking at the libraries is you might be thinking a little bit about how these libraries are making an effort to have all different kinds of representation in them.
I thought I talked that fast until I listened to her, and it made me feel a lot better. So I want to go back to our desired state as a district. And again, reiterate that this is one piece in the bigger picture. We will continue to support foundations through professional learning with Wilson. We have a commitment to our students and our staff. We hope to adopt Lucy Calkins to align with current instructional materials. Deborah Reed said this can be done. It will not be easy, but it can be done. And per Lucy Calkins, other districts have done this, and she will put us in contact with those districts. To support teacher professional learning, we hope to develop a 3-year progression of learning for K-5 teachers to support implementation of new and existing materials. We hope to develop those guidance documents and curriculum materials by revising the literacy block expectations document to provide more guidance and support to our teachers. We want to continue to focus and operate with an equity lens so children have choice in their literature selection, and that we are consistently monitoring text. We also want to develop that MTSS system that establishes a flow chart of supports that are aligned to match student need with intervention, provide additional training to those providing interventions, and establish an aligned data management system. And for all of the Ames Community School District, we need to create a culture of literacy. I have asked Christy Mixtor to join me this evening to discuss an overview of a unit through the standards.
So what you'll see in front of you is, if you're a teacher, a really cool document. It lays out a unit of study. This is one example, I think, of a third grade unit on character studies. And so when you look down the side underneath the column of sessions, You'll see that in this unit there are 19 sessions, so 19 basically lessons that teachers would have available to provide for students around character studies. If you follow the column across, or go across the row there, so like, for example, in session 1, one thing that Lucy Calkins and the Teacher College have put together is a really comprehensive diet. So when kids are exposed to a mini lesson within this resource and the activities that go with it, the active engagement part, they're really focused on a multitude of strategies. So this isn't a lesson on summarizing text or looking at characters. It's really trying to put together multiple things, because that's what authentic readers do, right? We follow characters through a book and watch how they develop and how they change based on the experiences that they have. And so they put that together in a row. So for example, in session 1, a teacher would have opportunities to assess and expose students to a writing standard, to multiple reading standards. So RL 3.1 happens to be a standard for reading literature. RL 1, 2, and 3, so this is third grade, first standard, second standard, third standard. All of those speak to key ideas and details within a text. You'll see that it continues on through craft and structure. Standards 4, 5, and 6 speak to craft and structure. How's this author putting this text together? Let's talk about that as a class. And then it moves into standard 10, which is we read volume. We get better as readers because we read. So there's opportunities within this lesson that have all of those standards. It also, in all of her lessons, have something to do with speaking and listening standards. So thinking about our 21st century goals for our kids, how do we collaborate, how do we interact, how would we have rich dialogue with our peers. Every unit, every lesson has something that addresses the standards around speaking and listening, and then also addresses the language standards, which have to do with vocabulary. They have to do with how kids make sense of the words that authors use to tell a story. And so within one lesson, you'll see that there are multiple things that the authors of this are putting together to make sure that our kids have those rich experiences. It looks like a lot of different things. It almost looks like there's so much, how do you even pay attention to it? But when you really go through a unit and look at it, you'll see that there are certain standards within that unit that they're really focused in on, but they also want to give a broad stroke for students to be entering these lessons in the places that they are as readers. You'll also see that 3.10 or 2.10 if it's a second grader, or 1.10 if you're a first grader, is in almost every lesson, because one of the main foundations of this program is that kids are reading. They're reading a wide variety of texts. There's a lot of choice that students have in what they're reading. They're not whole class novels. There's a mentor text, so teachers are taking students through a common text for some of that rich dialogue, but kids are then going out and applying that to their own books. So I might read as a mentor text a story on Frog and Toad, right? So together I'm taking my class through Frog and Toad, but I can have a conversation with my students about how Frog pretty much handles life in this way. You know, can you find a way in your book that a character deals with life? And kids can be at a wide range of readability and be able to understand that and take that into their stories. And you'll see that in this picture. And teachers will have that opportunity as well.
So thank you. The reason that this was on the table tonight is not only a discussion item, but also an action item. It's not because we wanted to slip one past you. It was because we know that May 1st, the state of Texas puts in their orders statewide Heinemann, and they do orders first come, first served. So if we didn't do an action item tonight to move forward with the purchase, we would be at the mercy of behind the state of Texas. And we really hope to get materials to our teachers and our students for the next year. I just want to end with that a literacy program on its own does not transform the quality of education across an entire district. And our efforts to improve literacy do not stand alone in isolation from the district's other initiatives. I am certain that most anything I've shared tonight, I can't please anyone. No program will. It's one piece of the bigger picture. I am most certain as an educator that there is not one magic packet of instructional materials that will meet the needs of every single child. I am also most certain that we have outstanding teachers as well as leaders that have committed to our children to reach their individual educational and personal potential by whatever means necessary. And that means utilizing a variety of different resources. Again, it's one piece of the puzzle. The biggest piece is that we believe all students can learn. And that when we reach our desired state, all pieces will be aligned for student success. Thank you.
What questions are there for Amy or any of the other staff members that have joined her?
It's kind of a two-part question. We had a great discussion in the Teaching and Learning Committee about how the core curriculum would be for like the 85% of the students, correct? And then the additional curriculum like foundations would be for the other 14%. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit, and then also talk about how this would align with what we have like for foundations? How would that integrate together?
Right. So I think when you look at adopting a core curriculum for reading, you look at the universal tier, which is between 80 to 85% of your student population. Our data, let me pull up some numbers here that I've written down, suggests our proficiency in the third grade is at 87%. Fourth grade, 83%, fifth grade, 88%, and sixth grade, 86%. Those additional interventions that we have in place with success as well as special education can cater to that other percentile of students. I think one of the things when you look at partnering, and like I said, when Deborah Reed said, it won't be easy, but it can be done. It's just like teaching, right? It's not easy, but it can be done. And we will continue to tailor interventions to meet the needs of the individual child, because not one intervention is right for every single student. And that's why we rely on our leaders, our teachers to collaborate during PLCs and look at the data that they have to make sure students' needs are being met. Partnering with foundations, as you'll see from the Wilson website statement, is that it's not meant to be a core curriculum. It's meant to be partnered with a comprehensive literacy program. It will require extensive professional learning and professional development, which Superintendent Reisner is committed to, as are our leaders and our directors.
That was it. Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned something about mirrors and windows, but it wasn't clear how that manifested itself. Can you speak to that a little more, please?
Can you say that one more time, Lori?
Yes, you mentioned in talking about equity and students being able to see themselves in the materials, mirrors, or also mirrors to see themselves, and then windows to see into other cultures, but it wasn't clear exactly how that manifests itself in the curriculum. Can you explain
Right,
that?
so that's why I showed the clip of her talking about the classroom libraries that we will purchase to accommodate all learners in the district. She speaks to not only racial equity, but also our LGBTQ, different family outlooks and perspectives, and all learners. Through the classroom libraries right now, teachers have been purchasing a lot of those on their own to be representative of the students in their classroom. Buildings, and principals can speak more to this, and their book rooms that they've established have purchased out of their building budget to have those windows and mirrors text available for teacher usage. With Lucy Calkins, that's provided in the classroom sets that we would purchase, Monique.
So, I'm sorry, it's still not clear for me. So, because I've been in the classroom and I see there's like a wall of books and the students have their little buckets and they got their books in their bucket and they got to read those books and whatever. And so, like, how many books come? Are we getting, how much, getting thousands of books? Like, that's just what I'm not clear on.
Let me get out my cheat sheet. My cheat sheet. There's a comprehensive list that Lucy Calkins sent. Here. And I added this to the Lucy Calkins component that you guys have. And it shows what comes with the units of study, what I didn't bring is this for you all, which I'm happy to make, which talks about trade packs for each grade level. I'm happy to make a copy of that for you. They come in series bundles. I believe 80 texts per classroom, 80 texts per grade level would be
So it
available
would be-
per building.
So that's what, yes, that's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to, so 80 per grade per building.
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yes.
very helpful, thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. And I can give you this too.
Could we get more?
You can get,
I just asked.
we can with an additional cost. I would have to run that quote past Chris.
Any other questions?
Thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful. I have a couple questions. First, I appreciate you talking about not having a silver bullet for fixing everything. And even in my own family, I've noticed kids are at different places. And it can be very hard as a parent, especially, to know when I go to the library, what kind of books should I be picking out. And so I think it'd be helpful if we could be more purposeful in helping parents understand where their kids are at. It's just been a frustration of mine. But then if you can talk to a little bit about the differentiation process, how are you reaching 85%? So are there like levels within the curriculum that then you put kids into, or how do you manage kids throughout that process?
When you identify the 85% is usually done by assessments. So when I talked about the health of assessment of the system and using those metrics to identify, that's how we identify the 85% based on the metrics we utilize. In addition, one of the online components that they have is the one aspect, and this is a failure on my end, which I will own. In hindsight, I wish I would have had them speak more to parent resources that are available to support our students, as well as the parents. It's one thing we've talked at length about doing parent universities to make parents aware of what resources are available. I worked with Helen to create a one-pager for dyslexia resources for our district. I think that's something that we need to do more of to support our parents in working with their children, because it doesn't stop when they leave the classroom. We know they go home and we know they need additional supports.
So if there's these different tools, sometimes it seems like the language that's used between them could be different. How do you help kids, I guess, transition from if they need foundations in kindergarten and first grade to then all of a sudden they're achieving a higher level? How do you move them into, I guess, this new curriculum? Is it a challenge? And I know you talked a little bit about that.
You know,
You're gonna work
but
through
it's
it,
interesting, Luke, and I had a conversation with a teacher just today. And she said, I'm utilizing the units of study writing right now in my classroom. And she said, you know what was interesting is after she was sat on the Literacy Adoption Committee, and she said, I noticed that kids were bringing their foundations academic language to the table when they were speaking in the writing. I think she called it the super E word that they just learned today. So kids are making that connection. You know, we as educators can continue to support and propel that, but we've got to give kids a little credit too. Sure. And Christy can speak.
I can address that a little bit. So one of the requirements of this resource is that teachers really know their kids well. There's an assessment piece. You saw that in Amy's presentation around the metrics, some of those bigger system metrics. Our Iowa assessment would be an example of that. That kind of speaks to our system health, you know, how's what we're doing in a broad stroke. In this particular resource, there's more opportunities to assess. Kids are reading a lot. There's a high volume of interaction between a student and a text, and teachers through the professional learning within this will know how to really kind of kid watch, if you will, so that they're picking up on opportunities for what does a kid need, what does a student need to move forward, what's the next step of that. All of the reading behaviors within what we call reading bands, the way that we level text. There's nuances that happen. So a student who's just entering text might need to know that, hey, a picture might help me know. There's a big picture of a bear, and the word says bear. You know, so they're introducing that concept. As they move through the levels of text, it gets more complicated, right? There's patterns into text, and then you move into where it's not so picture supported, but you need to have a dense sight word bank. And so those are the lessons that teachers are exposing. At the core level, but then kids are within the text that they're ready for in a timely manner. They don't have to wait for 4 or 5 other kids to be ready for that same level of text, and teachers are able to move them through it with some flexible teaching as well. And I think as our teachers continue to experience that and as our resources can support that, they'll be able to communicate to parents at an even higher level than what we currently do about those specific needs of an individual student. Help?
Thank you. And then my last question is probably for more Sue and Steve. It's a little concerning to learn that we don't have a core curriculum, I think was the term you used, for reading. Are there deficiencies in other areas of our education that we need to review? Having teachers have to go out and get stuff to provide our students, are there other areas that would maybe be enhanced?
Teachers have been asking for this for a really long time. And they haven't been asking in other areas like they've been asking for this. So this is long overdue. I don't think that writing was back then, and I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, that the principals kind of just went out on their own and got some stuff, and we got Lucy writing at the time and rolled out some professional development for the quilt team, but there was no great plan to let that trickle back to the building. So some people in the room got some good training, but it didn't get back to anybody else. But I'd say this is long overdue.
I think we continue to look to how to differentiate, and with what we're learning through our critical consciousness training, that there's continued areas across the curriculum that we need to help support. So our science, our social studies, new materials were brought in last year for science. We know our social studies is something that we are going to need to go a great deal more in depth with, and to look at that with that equity lens as we delve into. So unfortunately, this isn't going to be the last time we're at the board table talking about the resources to help our teachers to help that educational experience be even greater and richer in our classrooms.
Great, thank you.
I have loads of concerns, but I guess I'm not, for $500,000, I'm still not clear how we are aligning this system with foundations. I would like to know what the plan is to do that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeanette. I think, as Deborah Reed said, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a long road, and we're going to have to work to figure that out together, collaboratively. It's not going to be one person at the table. It's going to be our leaders, our directors, our teachers, sitting around to figure out what this looks like and how we make this work. It has been done. That is a step in the right direction, is we know that it has been done before, and we will ask those experts around us and give guidance from them.
What do we get for the $500,000? What? Oh, go ahead. So,
Can I add one thing to that? I think it's important, like what Amy was saying in her presentation, that these aren't competing resources, they're complementary resources.
So how do they complement?
Yep.
I guess I'm still lost.
Yep, so when you're thinking about that balanced literacy approach, the phonics, the skill work, how letters work, how sounds work, how they go together, when they do certain things, when a vowel team says a long sound instead of a short sound, all of the nuances of language is what foundation really breaks down for our students. Those are critical skills for our K-2, from a core standpoint, for our K-2 students. It's what breaks them into being a reader. It's how I know this says dog instead of puppy when I'm looking at those. I have to be able to pay attention to that as a reader. I have to be able to know that language has patterns to it. Those patterns help me become a more efficient reader so that I'm not bogged down with trying to figure out what a word says, and I can be thinking about the meaning within it. Foundations provides that core opportunity for all of our students with the way that we're implementing it right now. What the reading units of study will bring in is more of that application piece. So they will have those foundational skills, especially within our K-2 program, because any core reading program would. It wouldn't be right to not have that in there, but they're going to complement and they're going to provide opportunities for kids to practice. So what they're learning in their foundational, or the foundations lessons will then be applied, implemented, supported through feedback, small groups, flexible grouping by skilled teachers who know, you know what, I need to pull this group again, and we really need to look at words and letters and how they go together, where another group might be needing something different. So with the amount of volume that students will be expected and exposed to in the workshop model that the reading units of study bring in, or the writing units of study, Foundations is kind of that bridge between the two. In order to be a writer, I need to understand English language and how it works so I can communicate and convey a message. And so I'm going to take all the patterns and lessons that I'm learning in Foundations to put that message onto print. In order to consume text, I have to understand how the English language works so that I can make sense of words, so that I can enjoy a story, get information, do the things that we do, the reason why we like to read. So they're really not, I don't see them as competing components. I see them as a really nice diet for our kids coming in, where Foundations can be more of that intervention piece is in our upper grades. For students who have not met those expectations, then it's a nice resource where it brings it in there. But it's still a complementary resource. They work really nicely together. It's just at an elementary level, teachers have a lot of learning, that we're doing to make sense of it and how it all comes together. Does that help?
Well, that's the piece actually that concerns me, is because when you have a struggling reader, we need that systematic, explicit approach. So I am very worried that we'll be introducing texts that they have not learned at Foundations. That these are two different programs. So then they learn CK, but then, like you said the bear piece, they should not be guessing. We should not introduce anything that they have not learned. Or toad, frog and toad. If you don't know how that the O and A make that sound, there is no way. So we're guessing that they say frog, good enough. So that's the problem that I'm worried about, that I'm worried that will confuse our children, that this is confusing, that it will be introducing texts that they're not able to read.
I think, though, that comes with that opportunity in the workshop when they are doing that reading. As teachers, we're making sure that they have access to text. So those little boxes that kids are pulling books off the shelf to have, that is a specialized diet for that particular student.
Right, they're level readers.
Can be, yes.
They're all in a level, but it doesn't.
But it can be the decodable texts, it can be the print that they're working on, it can be the poem that they read in a Foundations lesson. All of those access to text will be what's in those little boxes for students. It's a pretty specific diet that students are getting exposed to. We want opportunities for fluency, so we need easy reads in those boxes. We want opportunities for challenge, things that are pushing students, right? These are words I'm not as familiar with, but I'm going to practice the patterns that I want in there. That's proven in the research that kids need a diet that has everything within that, and then they need that instructional piece where they're practicing the opportunities that they have. How much challenge that we put in books? Obviously, we don't want kids sitting during reading with books that they can't read. So that's where that skilled teacher comes in and makes sure that they've got the diet that they need.
So that's in individual basis. It's not a systemic way. Like how the teachers are doing this individually. I'm worried about what we're doing as a system here, right? We have these two programs. They're not competing programs. They have to align. And for $500,000, I have to know that we can do this. I think it's a big gamble for me to say, I think it's a lot for you to ask me to say yes to $500,000 when you're like, we're going to work hard on this. I know they're working hard every day. And I don't think the children, it's not that they need more effort. They're putting a lot of effort into it, right? So it's not an effort thing. It's not guessing. We need this systematic, explicit, and we need, I'm sure there's something out there that would complement Foundations better than a structured literacy, balanced literacy. I just don't see the alignment.
I think, though, thinking about this decision, this has been vetted through multiple educators, researchers, people in the trenches, people at the district office. So this is not an opportunity or something that we're asking that hasn't been well vetted through a number of layers within the system. I appreciate your lens on that. It is a big decision.
I feel that we are leaving 20% of our students out. 80% of our students will learn no matter what you put in front of them. And the 20%, we're leaving them out. And if we talk about equity, that's equity to me. Equity is, we as a board right now, we have to choose. Do we propagate the systems of inequity or we don't? And we investigate this more. This is not, I know the teachers want something. I want to give them something, but I can't give them something for $500,000 that we're gonna just work it as we go. I just don't think that's a good plan.
Can you speak to that 20% in terms of what does a day in the life look like for someone whom maybe these materials do or do not work for them, but what does their experience in our classroom or our system look like?
Sorry, I feel like I've been saying it all. So, I think putting together a diet for students is important for all teachers to think about. And this resource just adds an opportunity for us to do this without teachers then taking their time to go out and figure out what they're going to teach tomorrow. That's already decided to some degree, and teachers then have the flexibility to decide how to meet the needs of the variety of students within the classroom. When we're thinking about that MTSS model or that 80-20%, this is the opportunity that we're exposing to all students through our core aligned systematic approach to how we want to expose kids to reading. Then for that 20%, that's where some of our other resources come in, our leveled libraries, the reading records that a teacher does to really pinpoint what is it a student is finding to be a barrier between the text that they're reading and the level that we want them to be at, and what are those nuances that they need to have so they can provide that instruction. We also have layers within our elementaries. We've got our success teachers who provide a really intense intervention on an ongoing basis. We have students with IEPs that we have targeted even more so that these are the needs of this particular student at this particular time in their education, and we're providing intense interventions there. So that is happening both in the classroom and through the support of the resources that we have through our people and the resources that we provide in terms of materials.
And one other thing that I wanted to speak to is that differentiation that has to happen every day in our classrooms. Obviously, those students are students that we have to find materials and resources for. If I remember correctly, one of the materials that we'll be looking at is adding those libraries that do support all of our readers, including the above readers and those students that are below. And so those are additional books that we will want to be adding to our libraries so that they are being supported across the board.
In addition, Jeanette, to answer the second aspect of your questions, I included the Lucy Calkins components in there. And I think one thing that we haven't discussed is our students that need extensions. And I think sometimes we forget those students. They also have that if-then curriculum that offers additional units of studies. So those students that may test up can go forward. It also presents if-then conferring scenarios that support targeted instruction and differentiation throughout Lucy Calkins reading. So there's not only the extensions, but also the interventions that are available in Lucy Calkins. And sometimes we forget about those extensions.
I think a question I have, it's kind of a follow-up to the previous one. We've talked a lot about how this looks to the staff, and I understand the staff needs this. But like literally, what does a day in the life of a student that is a struggling reader look like? I mean, I've lived this with a reader that struggles, right? I've tried that, she does foundation, she can read all the things that foundation says, but if I try to push her a bit beyond that and have her guess, she gets frustrated and she won't even try. So for those type of students, what what does a day for them at school look like? Like, how are they spending their time? Are they getting pulled out? Are they being in the classroom? How are we handling that to make sure we help support those students?
I think it depends on the student and the need of that student. For some of our students, we do have opportunities for them outside of the classroom where they're getting an intensive intervention. For some of our students, it goes back to what Sue was saying with our differentiation. We're making sure that kids have access to text that they can read, that moves them along, so that, like what you just said, when students experience too much of that frustration, they'll shut down. So we want to make sure that we are aligning them with text that's just enough above them, that's going to push them and develop those skills that we want them to have, but it isn't going to frustrate them out. We know through the research that readers get better at reading by reading. And we want to make sure that we are increasing the volume and the amount of time that our kids have to interact with text that's their choice, text that's at their level, feedback from teachers and peers around what reading looks like and sounds like. And you'll also see in the units of study the types of lessons that our kids are going to be exposed to isn't just about the skill of being a reader. It isn't just about how to break down words, although that is a piece of it, but it's also talking about what are authors trying to do? How do you enjoy a good book? It isn't always about, do you get the right vowel team and that right sound, although that's a piece of it, because you can't enjoy books if you can't read them, but it's also about the adventure that you go on. Frog and Toad do a lot of really cool things. There's some predictability and there's some pattern to those stories that, as a reader, once I understand that, then I can interact with the text in a way that may not be as frustrating or as, out there, like confusing to understand. And the basis behind this particular program really builds on that and celebrates readers and why we read and why we would want to read, why we pick up a book in the summer when we are out on the deck instead of just sitting there, why we want to go somewhere in text, or why we want to learn something. It talks to those types of strategies and skills as well.
And Ellen, I think it's also to your point, how do we help our students that become comfortable within that decodable text, have that scaffolding there and a teacher conferring with the reader to help them transition to other texts too. And that takes a lot of skill through that professional development that we're going to be providing for our staff members to help journey into all the great text that is available for our students, because decodable text, they do serve a great purpose, but we know we want our students to be able to use that mirror and window analogy to see life outside of just the text that we have been providing for our students and providing much more for them.
I love the idea, right? I'm generally supportive, but I am scared at the statement of it's not going to be easy, it's going to be hard. That worries me, because I want to make sure that the part that's hard doesn't hurt the 15 to 20% that really need it, right? That's a real concern I have. But
It will. There's so much about, I'm stunned we're having this conversation. This philosophy about read and the love of reading, I get it. But if you can't read, it doesn't matter how many books you have in front of you, if you cannot figure it out why OA says, or why, it's just beyond me that we're having this conversation about having kids read and read and read more, when what we should be focusing on them actually figuring out the vowels. And I know that's what we're doing, so I don't want us to change our philosophy and having our teachers pushing books down our kids' throats when they cannot read them. And the emotional piece of that, we're working on mental health. That's a huge piece. Mental health for kids that cannot read is a huge piece.
I think one thing that we can celebrate, Jeanette, is in my conversations with Kim from Wilson, is that we are 1 in 4 districts in the state of Iowa that are implementing K-1, 2, and next year grade 3 foundations for every single student. And I think that's something we should celebrate, that we did make a commitment. You made a commitment prior to me being here. These leaders have made a commitment. The teachers have made a commitment to implement that with fidelity. And I think that's something we should celebrate, because
Yeah, I
I
get
believe
it.
we are meeting the needs of those students. So thank you to the board for approving that before I got here.
So then
Yeah,
we
Miss-
have teachers, learning foundations and Lucy?
Yeah,
Ms. Lane?
yes.
First of all, I want to start off by thanking you and everybody else that was involved in the comprehensive review. I know you got a lot of different people together, and that's not always easy to do. I definitely do agree, because this goes back to our whole discussions of getting foundations here, that we need a curriculum district-wide. That's what students have needed teachers have needed for years. We've been working on that for a long time. I also agree that that needs to be aligned to our core curriculum in our standards. That's what, the most important thing, especially when it comes to assessments later on. And finally, I also agree that it must, when we look at these literacy programs and curriculums that we're looking at, they must be looked at with a lens on equity. So I do have some reservations and some concerns. And what I would like you to do first, I have about 3 questions. But the first one is, describe to our audience, not only here but at home, what the difference is between the balanced literacy and a structured literacy. What we currently have with foundations is a structured literacy program. And then how is that different from a balanced literacy program that the Lucy Calkins program would entail?
If I understand the question correctly, so a structured literacy program would be more of those specifics, the phonics pieces. Am I using the right definition, or the right? We use different terms for literacy in different ways, so I want to make sure I'm speaking to your specific question. Structured literacy would be that importance of phonics, teaching how letters go together, how our sounds work, how our words work in our current language. I don't see that as separate as balanced literacy. I see that as a component of balanced literacy. Years and years ago, they had what was called the reading wars, right, where all the researchers got together and we had a big debate in our field about, do we teach phonics or do we teach what that was then called whole language? And for years, researchers fought about what was best. And they've come to the conclusion that we need both. That readers develop through a combination of both authentic experiences with text, whether you call that the love of reading or just reading. It's much more comprehensive than that, but kids need exposure to text. They need time in text, they need to grapple with it, they need to understand the structures and how it works. And they also, not surprisingly, need access to how does our language go together? How do we put sounds together to make words? What are the patterns and predictable ways that words come together that make sense, so as a reader, I can attack any text and make it make sense, or any word and make it make sense. You want to add to that?
And I'm going to go right to the article that I believe was sent to the board, produced by Deborah Reed from the Iowa Reading Research Center, and this is kind of in a nutshell. Structured literacy instruction is the umbrella term used by the International Dyslexia Association to unify and encompass evidence-based programs and approaches that are aligned to the knowledge and practice standards. IDA defines KPS as the knowledge and skills that all teachers of reading should possess to teach all students to read proficiently. Structured literacy approaches are effective at helping students with learning disabilities in the areas of reading, such as dyslexia, learn to read and write. Put simply, structured literacy is explicit, systematic teaching that focuses on phonological awareness, word recognition, phonics, decoding, spelling, and syntax of the sentence and paragraph levels. Balanced literacy is a philosophical orientation that assumes that reading and writing achievement are developed through instruction and support in multiple environments, using various approaches that differ by level of teacher support and child control. Although phonics, decoding, and spelling may be taught in word study lesson, the skills typically are not emphasized and rarely taught systematically. Rather, students are encouraged to use word analogies and pictures or context to identify words. Balanced literacy instruction is focused on shared reading, guided reading, and to discuss them with the teacher in homogeneous groups, and independent reading, which is they self-select books to read on their own. So that's in a nutshell.
Did the group, the committee that looked at the, boiled it down to 3 and then to 2, did they have a discussion about the, balance versus structural? Did they have a discussion?
I believe they did
so
in
that
their
everybody-
smaller groups. We did have representatives from, Helen was our representative there from Decoding Dyslexia, as well as Karen Symes was there as a parent. So I believe those conversations may have happened in the smaller groups. I wasn't in the smaller groups to host those conversations.
So, yeah, my question, no. Yeah, my question is, did the entire group have that discussion of, and understanding of what balanced literacy is versus structured literacy?
I don't think we went into that core.
Okay, thank you. And then I do have a concern, and I want more detail about when Dr. Reed, because you said you went to Iowa City to meet with her about these things, when she described this as being difficult to use with phonics, which you've already committed to.
Let me give you your exact quote.
Okay, so, what is that, describe what that difficulty is, and, yeah, that.
I tried to be as prepared as I could without having questions, so.
Great.
In our conversation with Deborah Weed, we discussed the difficulties in aligning two curriculum built on very different philosophical orientations. She stated, difficult does not mean impossible, but I believe if it can be done, it will take some very skillful planning and delivery of lessons to draw on the strengths of one curriculum for comprehension and the other for foundational skills.
And so then after that input, you shared that with the group, with the committee, or was this after the committee had
This was
passed it
after
on
the
to the
fact.
administrators? This was after that. So, so then the principals and administrators, then you shared that with them, correct?
This statement?
Yeah.
It just came this weekend.
Okay. So that really wasn't factored into the decision to go with.
Remember too, when we did the deep dive with the vendors, each of them spoke specifically to the partnership with Foundations and the partnership with Lucy Calkins Units of Writing. That was on the rubric for the vendors, and they were prepped ahead of time to speak to those specific areas.
Okay. My concern then, go ahead.
I just want to talk about our literacy block for a second. It's a 2-hour literacy block that we currently have. And Foundations is 20 minutes to half an hour of it currently, and that's what it will be in the future too. So when we're talking about Foundations, we're not talking about our entire reading program, we're talking about a sliver of it. Currently, the teachers are then balancing that with whatever they go out and make up and find and put together. So currently, we've got Foundations as a little piece, and then a mad scramble with you and your team, what you find. So we're comparing, next year, we're going to have I hope, at the end of all this, we're going to have consistent materials for teachers to use for the rest of that block and marry it with Foundations so that we have the best of both worlds. Right now, it's just a little bit of Foundations and then whatever. I'm not sure if, I'm not sure.
You should have titled the talk.
Yeah. Well, and let me be very, very clear. I am, like I said in my beginning of my statement, we need curriculum. There's no question there. I'm not questioning that. I am concerned about the decision that we've made and the product we're talking about right now. And I'm concerned, my last question was in relation to the fidelity, because you brought that up. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of professional development and a lot of leadership in our buildings to make sure that these curriculums are utilized with full fidelity and that students and teachers are really picking it up and using it. when it's been described already as difficult to merge the two together, how are we going to be assured that at a, cost that is not low, $500,000 is $500,000, that they will both be implemented with fidelity?
I think that's a big question. And when I went back and I looked at the purchases over the last 3 years that we've made for our buildings without looking at consistency or partnering with programs, to Heinemann, mostly Fontes and Pinnell, we've paid $117,000 in the last 3 years. With Wilson Language Training, we've put forward $193,000 for supports. And I wasn't here last year, so I don't know if you spoke to the compatibility of foundations with the Lucy Calkins units of study writing, because I wasn't in those conversations. So I don't know if that was spoken to. But I think the other piece of the puzzle that we do currently possess in our district and in our classrooms is Lucy Calkins units of study writing. And we do know that the reading and writing workshop that Lucy Calkins created merged together to support one another, and they are definitely compatible. So that conversation was had.
Okay. Yes, I do have concerns about meeting all students' needs.
Right.
And making sure that students with dyslexia or other reading difficulties aren't left behind. That's something that when we did a very thorough review, and it took us a long time to finally get the decision with foundations, which I personally believe we could have done it in one semester, but it ended up taking us almost 2 years. But we made that commitment then, and now I just want to make sure we're not turning away from that, and that foundations isn't going to be is going to be kind of set aside and not be utilized to its full potential. And that's where that difficulty word popped up, and I'm like, what is that? What we really need to be doing right now? And I need a better understanding of that.
I kind of have something that goes off of that, making sure that it's, equitable for every child. What about the children that need additional challenge? We need to make sure that we're choosing something that's good for them as well. I have a child that needs additional challenge, and let me tell you, if he's not challenged, he can get disruptive. So he's got his own issues that he needs to have focus on as well.
And Jeannie, you're absolutely right. And I wish I could assure you that this is a silver bullet. I really do, but that's not possible. But I do believe that if we put this puzzle pieces together, we can make this work. I believe in our leaders. I believe in our teachers. I believe in the extra hours. They pinpoint interventions to the child to make that child be successful. That's the only assurance I can give you, is that you have dedicated professionals behind this work, and you have a team that's coming forward with this adoption, and that wasn't just in a corner by itself, that it was truly a collaborative effort.
I want to, first of all, I want to ask for a copy of Frog and Toad. It's like, this book sounds fantastic, right? Yeah, I totally want to read that book. I guess I just want to comment. So I agree with Director Rosser. I myself came in with several reservations, mostly, frankly, due to what I perceived as just a lack of communication coming out of the Teaching and Learning Committee. Director Perez told me that we had been updated about it, but I didn't necessarily get that we had been updated to the extent that would actually be helpful in having this discussion. I certainly don't feel like I was aware that there was this controversy. I get that people are very passionate about it. That's really great. I frankly know that there are people who don't like foundations. So, I guess I feel like what you're saying, that but not everybody's going to be happy. So I guess what I needed to hear was I needed to understand how we got to this point, since I didn't necessarily get that from the committee updates. And I am not a content expert. I don't know if any of us sitting up here are content experts, right? I think we may be very passionate, we may be personally engaged or involved, but none of us are content experts. And hearing that the professionals that we pay in our district to do this work are standing so solidly behind this makes me feel much more comfortable than I did coming in. So I want to thank you for the presentation. It was so incredibly thorough and helpful for what I needed to get to a comfortable place. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Just one question I had, or clarification, as I understand it, the reason we're doing both the discussion and the approval today it is about Texas, but just to clarify, that's to make it so we could have the content for professional development in June, because we have a lot of snow days at the end of the year. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's our goal. We're trying to get these materials in the hands of our teachers as soon as we can. And unfortunately, we are reliant on whoever we order this from. Texas just tends to be a little bigger and more spendy than we are, so.
One question I have when we hear the word difficult, because yes, it is a concern to hear that, but I appreciate that you did reach out to utilize outside resources as well as those professionals within the district that we have that understand this inside and out. And I am not, like Director Bankin, I am not an expert on this content. So when you say that it will be it's difficult but achievable, who is the part? Is it a team that works to put these things so that they complement one another? Will it be up to, it sounds like sometimes teachers, in terms of when they're doing one thing or other, that they're referring to the language that they use in helping kids, but is there a team, or how does that look?
I think that's something we would assemble immediately in order to make this all work and call together our leaders. We have a literacy task force internally currently that are looking at different areas, but in order to move forward and have that decision made, that's when we'll call together more people at the table so we can make this work. And we will rely on outside entities. It's okay to call people such as Deborah Reed. She is an expert in the field of literacy, and it is okay to ask questions of her and reach out for her guidance and support. It's okay to talk to the Teachers College, who is behind Lucy Calkins, and get their support. They've done this in multiple districts, and they have had success partnering with foundations. We will have to ask for outside support, in addition to assembling a very strong team of all of us together at the table to make this work going forward.
I don't know package-wise what we get from PD-wise when we buy it, but we've had a bunch of initiatives that we've rolled out over time, and we use our Wednesday after school time for professional development, and the teachers work together in their PLCs to make sense of things and collaborate and work together. So we've got systems built in to get to know something and learn something. If we can start that in June, which is I think why we're trying to hurry, start that process. Teachers are amazing, and they'll work during the summer, they'll get together, they'll do these things, but then we'll have structures in place to support them. I don't know if it'll be dazzling the first day we roll it out, but I'm not sure that anything we've ever rolled out has been dazzling on the first day, but we've got the structures in place to support it as we learn together.
Thank you very much for the information and for entertaining all of our questions. Appreciate it. Any comments from the public?
Karen Simons, 3203 Woodland Street. Here's my number one concern. When asked what a structured literacy program is, an administrator had to look it up. No one stepped forward to truly explain what a structured literacy program is and what the difference between a structured literacy program and what a balanced literacy program is. When asked what does the 20% look like in a day, I can tell you that through experience. Foundations. Foundations will teach you the sounds, the rules. Balanced literacy. Lucy Calkins, units of reading, will tell you to look at the picture, guess the word, listen to the rhythm, listen to the pattern. Let's keep guessing. That is not what Foundations teaches. It teaches the rules so that you can learn to read. Are they aligned? No. My daughter is doing Foundations, and she's being taught a balanced literacy program. You know what the reading strategies are? Let me tell you, if in Foundations, if you do not know the word, it is a trick word, and you are told what the word is. If it's balanced literacy, the reading strategies are break it up, try to sound it out. Does it sound different? Weird? Guess but look at the picture. What if you don't have pictures? You need pictures to read now? What is our community coming to? I'm sorry, that was a great presentation, but what about the rest of the readers? What about our purpose for equity? This is unacceptable for $500,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Anyone else?
Hello, I'm Jenny Coffey, first grade teacher at Sawyer Elementary. I just wanted to take a little time. We've heard a lot about what would a day look like, or how does a teacher put these two programs together. So we didn't have any teachers up here. I thought it might be useful to just hear a little bit about how I do this. So I've been teaching Lucy Calkins units of study in writing for quite a while now, both before we adopted Foundations and after we adopted Foundations. I will say from the start, I would never want to teach without Foundations again. So that has been an amazing program and has added, just through the teaching of it, a wealth of knowledge to me personally. In addition to that knowledge, the district has done a very nice job moving forward as we've adopted Foundations with providing additional training and additional resources for us to get better at Foundations. So I now can speak about syllable types and all the different rules for figuring out a word when I don't know it, that I just really didn't know before, okay? Now, Lucy, while she doesn't address a lot of that very specifically, in a way, for me, that makes it a little easier to move Foundations right into it, because I don't have to, in a lot of other like basal reading curriculums, I have to see how they teach it and then rethink about it and then come up with another way to say it. So Lucy's very strategy-based, not so much just word attack strategies, although she does have some lessons that discuss some different strategies you might do to figure out a word you don't know, but that's not the bulk of her units. We also have all these Common Core standards that I have to teach and make sure are covered, and Foundations helps tremendously with the ones that fall in that foundational skills part of the Common Core. It doesn't help me much with all the rest. So Lucy's lessons are more about, for example, in one of the last units that I was working on, we were talking about reading informational texts, and we had a list of strategies for what are some things readers do to get super smart about nonfiction. These are not just strategies about how do I attack a word I don't know. They're strategies about how I need to preview the book before I start so my brain is warmed up so I know what kinds of things I'm going to find in the book. They're going to teach a strategy of how I need to stop and study each page. Not just the words, but also all the things I find in headings, in pictures, in captions, in the way the page is structured. So I can learn a lot about a page when I don't even know the words. And it was kind of interesting because I have some non-readers in my room at the moment, and it was really neat for them to be able to shine in that lesson and say, hey, I'm really good at this. You know, the words have been hard for me for a while. I've gotten really good at learning things and making inferences from the way the author has presented the pictures on this page that have helped me learn about the topic. Maybe they didn't help me learn to read this word. Now, because I have all my Foundations training and background, when I'm pulling these flexible groups to the table, I know my readers. I know how they do during Foundations. I know which ones of them are sailing through. I know which ones of them are getting stuck on different things. I have lots of formative data from their Foundations tests about what they need the most help with. Lucy allows me to pull very flexible groups. It's not all about put these kids at the table because they're reading the same level of text. Because I have a couple of kids that are the same level, but their reading needs actually aren't the same at all. She allows me to pull flexible groups that need the same thing. And it's not at all difficult for me when I'm working with this reader, kind of just like Karen was saying. When she gets to a word and I can see that it's not one that you can tap out or look at a vowel team or a pattern that we've learned, I am not going to ask her to find a chunk and sound it out and see what you can do. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go, that's a trick word. We would call that a trick word in Foundations. We haven't learned that trick word yet. Here's what it is. And then as she's going, if she gets stuck on another word, and maybe it is toad, because we have learned OA says O. So I can say, hey, let's look up at our poster of all the vowel teams. OA is one of the words up there. Could you use that skill we learned in Foundation to solve this word? So I can seamlessly pull in whatever I've learned from my Foundation skills as I'm working one-on-one, one-on-three, one-on-four with my students to help them see it where it is. I think what makes it hard, the hard part is not how do I take my foundations and my Lucy and put them together, I really don't find that difficult to do at all. I find that it works very, very well. What's hard is making sure for my students that do get pulled out for part of the day because we have identified that they need a little bit of extra help, I want to make sure they're using the same language in that intervention program that I'm learning in the classroom. If they're getting pulled out because they need some extra challenge, I want to know that I've shared some of the strategies we've been using so that language gets hit their heart. It's hard to make sure, am I not only meeting all of those foundational Common Core standards, but all of the ones about reading literature and reading informational text. That's what makes it hard, is putting all of those pieces together. The nice thing about Lucy is she doesn't do a lot of straight up phonics instruction. She has a few lessons where she does discuss a few options for breaking words down if I'm stuck, but I'm probably not going to use that part. I'm going to use our foundation strategies for the kids, especially that I know need it. I might introduce a few other strategies to students who I think they might be useful for, but our classroom teachers read a lot with our students, hear them a lot, and because of foundations, really know where their skill set is with those foundational skills, and it is not hard for me to take that foundations information and put it right into that small group, especially now that I don't have to have all the kids at the same level reading at the same time with the same book. So I have lots of decodable books in my room as well, and I'm super excited to hear that we're getting some more. So when I'm helping my students make sure that the things in that little bucket of books are a good fit for them, I'm going to be able to point them towards some decodable books if I think that's going to be what they need, if I know that's going to be what they need. That being said, sometimes I have a student who really wants to learn more about snakes, or really wants to learn more about dancing or being a doctor, and I am not going to say, no, you can't have that book in your book box because it has some patterns we haven't learned yet, but I am going to say, hey, that would probably be a good book for us to read together, or for you to read during partner reading time, or hey, let me know when you get done with a couple of pages how often you're getting to words that you can't understand, and is that stopping that book from being interesting for you, or is this going to be a more book where you're learning some things from the pictures? We also have great technology in our classrooms, so I can make a list of books on Epic or Bookflix or some other places that will let kids listen to some of the books that they can't quite read themselves yet, so they can still get that content knowledge and have that learning as well. So I think there's a lot of ways that it's not hard to marry them. I think doing it perfectly to make it work for every student is hard no matter what we adopt, but I think, like Steve was saying, we have some good structures in place to help do that work to make sure that everybody can do that. So I just wanted to share a little teacher perspective.
Thank you for the teacher perspective. Any other comments? If it's about this, okay.
So I had a wonderful, actually, Helen Blickfitch, 3300 Eisenhower Avenue. I had a wonderful speech printed out, and then I've heard everything, and I'm just like, okay, I don't even know where to start. But I just wanted to say that some of the things that were said about, like a lot of our other schools in this district, in this state, like 100 plus, use Lucy Corcoran. I don't think that is a really good statistic to have, especially when the national report says that 36% of our fourth graders in the state are proficient at reading. 36%. That's not a really good number. In Ames, yep, we look great. We're sitting around, the 85 or 90% mark. I think that's good, but then, like everyone else has been saying, what about that other 15 to 20% of students? How are we going to help those? I think it's really unfortunate tonight that you have tonight to make this decision, and I hope that you all just sit back for a minute and think, hang on a minute, I don't have the information, I haven't read enough on this to make a decision for a $500,000 purchase. There is a huge difference between balanced literacy and structured literacy. I sent you all that article from Dr. Reed. She knows her stuff. She is an expert in reading. Yes, there isn't one particular strategy that helps all kids read, but structured literacy is the one program that you're going to get the most kids. That if you had to pick something, that would be the way you would go. I understand that our teachers need materials, and I don't want them not to have any materials. I really think they should have materials. But I don't think this is the set of materials for our kids. If we really, really want equity in this district, then we need to be looking at a structured literacy program. Reading is the one thing that is equitable for everybody. When you go out into the world, if you can't read, you have limited jobs, you have limited income, you have limited healthcare, you have limited standard of living. And then on top of that, you become a burden to the rest of society. Kids that are in juvenile delinquents or juvenile hall, whatever you'd like to call it, I would say the research has shown that the majority of those kids have a reading disability. So why are they juvenile delinquents? Because they have no other way of getting through life. They need reading as much as everybody else. So I had way more other things that I wanted to tell you, but I really think that you need to consider, take a step back. I know our teachers need the stuff, but our students need the quality, the high quality instruction that's structured literacy. Lucy Corkin is balanced literacy. We've had that or something similar in our district for years. That's what they teach when our teachers are students at university. It's balanced literacy. So it's the same thing. Our scores aren't going to change, and our state scores aren't going to change if we all keep using balanced literacy. So please, take a step back. Don't make this decision tonight. Read some information, get an idea. What's the difference between balanced and structured literacy and how this can help our kids? Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Any other comments from public?
Amy Edwards, 1204 Arizona Ave. I just want to piggyback off of this, which thank you to all of you for presenting and putting this information forward. My concern and question comes for the students, and I don't have a number and I don't know what that population is, but there are students that have missed the foundations. That was a K-2 rollout. They're on 3, 4, 5 now. We're not going to catch them at a foundations, and now it sounds like with Lucy that there's great things that could obviously work with the compensation piece. What are we doing for the students who have not had any foundations, who have not had anything? And I think to Principal Flynn's point, it sounds like teachers are just kind of grabbing at whatever. So we've got kids that are just being pushed through. I'm appreciative of the work that's going to be hopefully rolled out, and we're going to catch and we're going to make our students stronger in literacy, and we're hopefully going to have a literacy curriculum. But I want you guys to also just maybe talk about or figure out what are we going to do for the other kids, the kids who have already moved on, who aren't going to be, and they're in the middle school or they're in the high school. And we need them to be just as literate and strong in their skills with or without whatever's in place. So just something that I wanted to ask and have you consider. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the board committee updates.
So I have one update from the Facilities Committee. You can see the notes in the packet. The one thing that we're going to see a little bit more later on, so I wanted to bring it up now. In the most recent Facilities Committee meeting, Jerry had come back to us. He had been directed a couple of meetings before that by Superintendent Reisner to start looking at what it'd take to put plans in place for the expansion of Mitchell. As we had all talked about in the work session about the needs as our student population is growing. He'll have some information he'll bring back later on, but in that committee meeting and in the notes you can see it, we had an extensive discussion about that, and also he shared some estimated budget numbers for not only Mitchell, but what it would take to do the expansion for Mitchell, Meeker, and Edwards. Also, we talked about the prioritization of why Mitchell is coming up right now. Long story short, and you guys have seen the numbers from the work session, Mitchell currently its recommended capacity is 312 students, and currently there are 299 students within boundary. That was a couple months ago though, so I'm sure it's higher than that. So effectively, the school's effectively at capacity, especially with some of the new construction that's happening and going to be happening. We just do not have enough space there for the students that are in boundary. So that's the reason the superintendent and Jerry prioritized that one as the first. There was also a discussion asking about if we had a transition to attendance centers or some other sort of method to use the facilities, use the elementaries. would this expansion cause an issue there? And Jerry can speak to it a little bit later on if you want, but both he and Superintendent Reisner assured us that the expansion and the way they're looking at it, it would be fine both to be used as it would be now, but also to be used as an attendance center in the future.
I can give a quick update on the Equity Committee. The actual formal Equity Committee has not met since November. There have just been a host of scheduling issues. We're all sick. I don't know why we're all sick. But, you know, we've been dealing with that. We did have the opportunity for a subsection of the committee to meet. So I along with President Franson and Superintendent Reisner, is that it? Met. Just to talk about the committee and where it might go from here. And so I'm going to give an update to the formal committee, and I think we have some very clear ideas about how the Equity Committee can continue to be of service to the board as well as to the district. So hopefully we'll be seeing some movement there. And also there was a policy committee meeting scheduled for today. I believe I think it was today. I'm not sure what day it is. It was today. And it was canceled because Superintendent Reisner was not able to be with us today. So we will reschedule that. In the interim, Director Bierbaum and I will be talking. I think we're going to talk on Thursday. It's not a committee meeting, but we're just going to touch base on the modifications that we're going to propose to the committee structure. And so hopefully we'll have some movement on that fairly soon.
Any other committee updates?
Just give you a quick update on Iowa Association of School Boards related information. Most importantly, what's going on in Des Moines. The legislature, the Senate committee did move forward with the SAVE program, the penny sales tax, extending that to 2051. The not so good news is that they took a little bit more out of that for property tax relief, meaning, and I'm not going to get into the weeds, but it increases the amount of that money over the course of the 20, 30 years that will go directly towards property tax relief and not to schools. So they raised it from 15% up to a ceiling of 30%. That means in the long term, the school districts will receive less dollars, but we're at least getting it passed. So it's, again, you know, legislation sometimes, legislatures, the whole process kind of looks like sausage. And unfortunately, this is a very good example of where we started 2 or 3 years ago to get to this point. But it does look like it's going to get through by the end of the session, and that'll be a great assistance for us finishing our high school here locally and looking at some other projects that are on the horizon. So that will be very important. So I'll leave it at that. And also just a note, I did go to a conference this past weekend, and I'm not going to give you any details on that, but just fellow board members and others, I grabbed some materials for you that I'll share with you later.
Thank you. Any other, updates on the board committees? Thank you for those reports. Any comments from the public on board committee updates? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the public forum. And Latifa?
Hi, Latifa Faisal, 4934 Utah Drive. I just wanted to come and say out loud that the Therapeutic Learning Center at the high school is amazing, and the staff are amazing. And I hear a lot about concerns for mental health and making sure that all of our kids' needs are being met, and I just cannot tell you the difference that that program has made for my family, for my daughter, for my hope for my nieces and nephews, and all the other kids in Ames. There's a lot of work being done to take care of lots of different needs, and this one is I'm glad that you're doing it. I appreciate the ALP program is wonderful, and those teachers work so hard, and just wanted to say thank you out loud, and keep it up, and please just keep doing it. Just keep supporting them. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Latifa. We appreciate that. Helen, you're done? Okay. All right, we will go ahead and move on to consent items.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Perez.
The consent agenda tonight has the minutes from both the work session and the regular meeting on April 8th, the financial report for March of 2019, claims and payroll for March. We have 5 different contracts, one with best practices for professional development at Northwood, a renewal of our lease agreement for our mail machine, an agreement with Assembly eBoard Solutions for the online board meeting software through ISB, a facility use agreement with ISU for cross-country, and an agreement with LifeTouch for graduate photos and senior class photos. In addition, our open enrollment applications, and we do have a number of gifts tonight. We have 22 different donations to the DECA International Competition Conference, and those are the Cameron Carrico Foundation, $500, Perfect Game Inc., $100, New Link Genetics Corporation, $50, Converse Conditioned Air, $200, Hala Architecture, $200, Herrick Dental, $50, Northwestern Mutual, $200, McFarland Clinic, $200, Prairie Land Homes, $100, First National Bank, $100, Henkel Construction Company, $500, Mary Greeley, $100, Distinctive Landscapes, $500, Sweep Enterprises, $200, Total Property Management, $200, Artistic Lawn Care, $100, Ames Ford Lincoln, $100, Duckworth Waring, $100, Hatch Company, $200, Vision Bank, $500, Valor and Violet, $100, Joletto Insurance Agency, $100. In addition, we had snacks and personal items donated by Northminster Presbyterian Church for the pantry at the middle school, and $500 from the Frank McGreevy Memorial for winter clothing and boots at Edwards.
It's been moved by Benkin, seconded by Perez. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Before we move on to action items, we are going to take a 3-minute recess, and then we will be back to move through our action items. thank you for being patient with us for that quick recess. Board members, on the action items, we have moved item 20 up. We do have one of our attorneys here, so
Move it up.
in light of her schedule, we are going to first entertain the waiver of conflict of interest, and I will entertain a motion.
I move the board approve the waiver of conflict of interest with Allers and Cooney PC to perform legal work regarding the memorandum of understanding with the City of Ames for the additional SRO.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Rosser. Discussion. And this is Danielle. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. The reason, I've asked Danielle Hainfield from Allers to come and just talk about this a little bit. This is the second one of these I've had to bring to you, and it's really, these are the first in my career, but I was in a district that was much further away from Des Moines. So as we move into the work with the high school, I think there will probably be more and more items where we have, that will have work that joins with the city. And so my thought is, if I have Danielle explain to you why we need to do these conflicts and how other school districts are handling it, then as these come about in the future, we can put these on the consent agenda, and we won't have to have them as an action item each time. But I did want you to hear from them the reason we have, or from Danielle, why we have to do the conflicts when we have work with the city, and what their obligations are under the law.
And I know I'll try to be brief. I did appreciate Chris giving me this opportunity, because you are not alone. Our firm, as you may or may not know, represent a lot of public entities in the state, all across the state actually. And so we represent, in some respects, cities and school districts that are in the same community in a number of different instances. And what usually with regard to the cities, it's a very narrow representation that we have. For instance, with the City of Ames, we primarily do labor relations work for them. Maybe very specific labor questions that are specialized in nature, because generally speaking, the city attorneys and their staff handle their legal issues. However, there are occasions that we do some of that work. And as counsel for the school district, there are going to be occasions when you're going to be working with the city. And most of the time, it's going to be a collaborative nature, 2080 agreements, other types of arrangements, and things such as this MOU for an SRO, and also real estate matters, because you may be doing, as Chris mentioned with the high school, we have a lot of instances where there's going to be easements, there's going to be other infrastructure needs and things like that, where there's going to be agreements that are going to be necessary. Under the conflict of interest rules, or the ethics rules for attorneys, we are not allowed to engage in concurrent conflicts of interest, which means we cannot represent one client adverse to another, okay? And so in order to do that, we have to provide informed consent to both clients. So both the city and the school district would have to grant a waiver in this instance. And so what I've talked to Chris about is that we can't do one big global one, because part of our responsibility is to explain the facts of each particular instances. And I wanted to let you know as well that you always have the right, if we come before you and say, you know, we'd like to be able to do this work for you, you have the right to say we're not comfortable with that, and you do not have to grant the informed consent. The thing that you should know is that our firm internally, I just finished my tenure as president of the firm. I'm still on the management committee, but part of my role on that committee is to assess every conflict of interest that comes up. And we as a firm make an internal assessment before we would even approach you with a potential conflict of interest waiver, to assess whether we are comfortable that we can adequately represent the district and not, jeopardize our relationship with the city, or vice versa. And so I want you to know that we take this very seriously before we even approach you about that. So with this particular instance, in reviewing this contract, the city attorney generally will be involved. It's probably drafted the agreement, and so there would be communications between myself and them with regard to the agreement. I talked to my fellow colleague, Connor Wasson, who does a lot of the real estate work. Same thing, he works very collaboratively with the city attorney when they're dealing with easements or other types of things that are going to be needed. With the high school project, there will be a number of issues that are up. So I guess I just wanted to be able to come to you and tell you, we have the same issue with Johnston. We just built a new high school. Johnston, I did all of that work. We obviously worked with the city there and the school. Same thing with Urbandale, West Des Moines, Sioux City. A number of schools, and cities in the same situation. So we've had similar conversations. So I just wanted to be here to answer any questions that you have and to make sure that you can always reach out, whether it's through Chris, Jenny, or anyone else. If you ever have a question or concern about our ability to represent, if this were to come before you, we're always open to answer questions.
Any questions for Danielle? I appreciate you coming and explaining to us, even though we have had these discussions, and I appreciate your desire, Chris, to make sure we understand this as we do go into a phase where there will be more of these, and we can be maybe a little more efficient by including them in the consent agenda, given our better understanding from this. So thank you very much for coming. Appreciate that. So we have a motion that was moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Rosser. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thank you. Reading adoption.
I move the board adopt Lucy Calkins' Units of Study reading program to support literacy instruction in grades K through 5.
Second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Benkin. Discussion.
I move we postpone this item to 2 weeks so that it allows the board to gather more information and to get their questions answered regarding this particular item.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Colton to, I won't say it exactly, delay the vote 2 weeks.
Postpone for 2 weeks.
Postpone, thank you.
Yeah, postpone
the
for 2
vote
weeks.
for 2 weeks. Discussion.
I think the idea of delaying the vote for 2 weeks is a reasonable one, aside from the professional development days. That gives me hesitation, right? I'm not sure how much will change in 2 weeks. So I understand, I had the same consideration, which is why I asked the question at the end.
Sure. Let me address that and a couple other items for requesting the 2 weeks. One, I think it'll give the rest of the board and some others to really get into a deeper understanding of the difference between balanced and structured. I think there needs to be a more clear understanding of that by many. The second thing has been brought to our attention that, we need to get our order in by May 1st. To ensure that materials come from the company that we're buying this from. You know what, we're going to get the materials, and yes, we want to get it to our teachers as soon as possible, but the vast majority of our teachers live with either near or within the community. They'll get the materials, in a timely fashion. I don't think any of us can speculate, when that's going to happen. And the professional development that's then going to follow with those materials will follow. That's not going to really change whether we vote on it tonight or tomorrow night, in 2 weeks. So I really do feel strongly we need to look at this a little closer and follow our traditional procedures. We always bring this for discussion to the board 1 week, and then the following meeting put it on the agenda for action. This is not our typical way of proceeding, and we have a reason for why we function in that way. So information comes to us, we have time to discuss it, and get the questions we have answered, not only for ourselves, but also for our parents and the people we represent in the community. So I'd like to have those 2 weeks for those opportunities to take place.
I don't feel like I need the time, but I will always respect the right of a board member who feels like they need more information. So philosophically, I would be inclined to vote to support the request so that everybody can feel comfortable that they're doing their due diligence.
I guess I plan to vote against the amendment. I don't know what I'm going to learn in 2 weeks. I mean, we pay professionals to know this information, provide us the data, make changes as we go forward. So I think the discussion's been very lively, and I appreciate all the perspectives. But again, we pay administration to make these tough calls, and they're going to adapt. And especially if we have a time crunch, and if we can have more PD for our staff, if people are willing to move forward now, I don't know why we just take the vote and go. So I plan to vote against the amendment.
I will support the amendment. I respect a board wanting more information. Yeah.
While I do support wanting more time and wanting to do more due diligence, in the same token, we all know that these PD days are scheduled, and if we don't get the materials before those PD days, we would not be able to use those for that.
Amy, a clarification. So by ordering it, I want to make sure that I'm understanding this. By ordering it before May 1, we would have the materials for the professional development days that our teachers have in June. If we don't order them before May 1, we will not have the materials for those professional. So we won't have the materials for next fall.
We are at the mercy of Hyman after May 1st as to when our order gets filled. Chris can speak to more of that. Is that what you're thinking?
No, I was telling you, get the mic.
Oh. All we know is that if our order is not placed by May 1st, they do all of the orders first. Our goal, it's usually a 6-week order. So if we order now, we believe it will be in our hands before the June PD days, but we have no, written contract as to when these materials will receive. It's generally a 4 to 6 week purchase line.
So, for example, even if we voted tonight, there's no guarantee we're going to have these materials by the end of the year, correct?
Correct.
Can you comment on what you said about for the fall, though?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they will be in the hands by the fall. I mean, we know that, but we're trying to get these in the hands of the teachers now so they have them over the course of the summer.
How long of a delay would you expect if we waited 2 weeks to vote? How long of a delay from order date to receipt?
That's a really good question. I'm happy to email Beth and ask that question and get back to you, but I can't. I mean, you're at the mercy of a large vendor. So typically we know orders are received 4 to 6 weeks once the purchase is down. But Texas places their order May 1st, and they do all of their orders, and then we will follow those orders.
So I'm struggling here on best path forward. Philosophically, so me personally, I don't need any more information. I've read everything. I've been on teaching and learning committee since I got on the board 3.5 years ago, and have been a part of the discussions. I absolutely appreciate everyone's involvement in this. I've had several discussions with people over the past 3.5 years on all of this. I was going to ask Steve Flynn, but he disappeared. Why has our district been needing these materials for 5 to 6 years? And I struggle with why we have needed these materials and we haven't gotten them, and we are willing to delay it again. I am not on the board because I know anything, even though I have been a part of all of these discussions for the past 3.5 years. I was not elected to tell our professional educators how to do it. And I really, really appreciate our community involvement. I do. I appreciate everyone sharing their personal experiences, and I don't know if we are at the forefront of this modern day discussion of whole language versus phonics, but it sure feels like it. And, but I struggle that we are potentially asking our teachers to continue to piecemeal it together when their jobs are hard enough. I struggle that we can't make a decision and trust our professionals to bring us the materials. They may be in 6 or 7 years, maybe we will get to the bottom of this whole balanced structured literacy, but I can easily answer the question that we have structured literacy because we've got foundation. Steve talked about it. It's 20 to 30 minutes of our literacy block. So I can answer that questions in one of two ways. I can say we have structured literacy because we have a 20 to 30 minutes, or I could say, well, no, the entire literacy block is not structured literacy. But I don't believe that I am in a position as an elected official of this community to make that call of whether or not 20 to 30 minutes is enough to define structured literacy. What I can make the call on is to challenge our professionals to say, who are the various resources that you have reached out to? That was one of the very first questions I asked Amy is, have you reached out to Dr. Deborah Reed because we have heard her talked about so much? So I appreciate that we have reached out to those resources. Does it give me concern to hear that it's going to be difficult? Yes, it does. But on the same token, I also put a lot of faith in the educators here in the community to make these decisions for us. So having said all of that, it does concern me that we haven't followed our typical protocol of having it brought one time and then being voted on the next. But life happens. It happens all the time, and if we're going to tie our hands behind our back and not allow our professionals, yes, this is a big expenditure, but if it is an expenditure that is over 7 years, that is less than $100,000 every year. And is that worth it for our kids? It is. So if we get 5 years out of this program, that's $100,000 every year. And it sounds like we've spent $119,000 last year and 100 plus the year before. So I appreciate, while I appreciate the amendment, I struggle that I'm going to get anywhere in 2 weeks with additional information. I just don't know what else we can ask our professionals to provide for us to be able to make this decision. If we really believe there's additional information, then let's draft those questions and have those questions put to our professionals to bring that additional information back.
I'd like to point out that the motion was made to postpone for 2 weeks. That's the motion that's on the floor, and I'd ask my colleagues to only address postponing and not argue the primary motion. So if we want, that's what we should be. And as chair, I'd hope that you stick to that parliamentary procedure rule. We're debating right now postponing for 2 weeks. We're not debating the merits of the literacy, because I fully agree that we need a literacy program. That is not what's the motion that's on the floor. The motion that's on the floor right now is to postpone for 2 weeks.
My comments were the merits of making a vote tonight. That is why I am making those comments the way they are. I'm not talking about the first vote. My reason for not desiring to be a support of the amendment is because I do not believe we should delay this vote anymore for all the reasons I gave. Does anybody else have any comments?
I think I do need a little bit more time, just because I feel like $500,000, it's a lot of money for hearing it's going to be difficult, but we're going to do it. That piece about difficulty worries me, because it makes me think, why are we choosing this path? Why are we choosing this difficult path that we all eager to take it and we're going to do it? It feels counterproductive. If it's going to be a difficult path, couldn't we have chosen a different path? $500,000 is a lot of money for a gamble. So I agree with it. I don't know. I think we need a little bit more time. It feels like it's a lot of money, and I don't even know how much of that $500,000 is for what. Is it PD? Is it all materials? I don't think any of us know that.
Amy, can you answer that question of what the $500,000 brings us?
In the components piece, it shows you everything you get. In addition, I got a response to when these materials would come. The teacher kits will take 2 to 3 weeks if order placed before May 1st. Libraries take longer. If after May 1st, we can't predict. They wouldn't even venture a guess, totally dependent on Texas. So within the components, there's the classroom library, and in that document, Jeanette, that you have, it shows the units of study that you received, and I can hand this up here too.
Just one. I don't have time to look at that right now.
Any other comments? Seeing none, there is an amendment on the floor to postpone our vote for 2 weeks on the literacy adoption. All those in favor of postponing the vote indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
It is defeated 3-4. We will go to the initial motion made by Perez, seconded by Benkin, to move the board adopt the Lucy Calkins units of study. Discussion.
The thing I keep coming back to is, well, first of all, thank you, Jenny, for speaking. That was the piece that I needed to understand, because like I said, I have students, I have a child that has issues, I have a child that doesn't, I have a child that's like completely different, that won't focus on anything, but he does really good. So I want to make sure the teachers have what they want, and I greatly respect the principals and the presentation they made, and I understand they need, I definitely don't want us to forget about structured literacy. I mean, the concern about will we still have that, it sounds like we absolutely will. We need to have that, that's key. But it sounds like what's being proposed really is our professionals are saying, in addition to the structured literacy, we need to fill the whatever, and they think this is the best way to fill the whatever. I'm not in a position to second guess that. I've lived it. I understand what it is and means. But this district has taught my kids to read. I don't know. I do not like the idea that it says, you know, it's going to be hard. I really would want to press that Amy and the team would find a way to start those discussions as soon as possible if this approval goes through, that we really understand how are these going to be integrated. And I would start by talking to Jenny and other teachers on how they already do it. I mean, that's awesome. So this is a tough decision for me. I think I'm generally in support of it because in my head I know that I trust our professionals. But I have all the same concerns that everybody's expressed. So.
I respect our professionals. Dissent is not disrespect. So just because I'm dissenting, it's not out of disrespect, it's not out of mistrust, it's out of necessity, I became an expert at teaching a child how to read. So I know a thing or two. I'm not getting paid, but I still know. And this is what I bring to the table. I bring that other lens, that when we talk about equity, we're not just talking about someone seeing their picture. If they can read what they see, that will be even better. I realize that well-intended people do harm, and we propagate the systems of inequity, and we don't mean it. We don't mean it. Nobody gets up in the morning and say, I will propagate a system of inequity. We don't get up in the morning with that thought. However, I feel strongly that this is what we're doing.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to the vote. It was moved by Perez, seconded by Benkin. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
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 Passes 5-2. Item 16, 2019-20 new money budget.
I move the board approve the proposed 2019-2020 new money budget.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, second by Rosser. Discussion.
There's a lot of collaboration that happens, but I just wanted to highlight the fact that the state of Ames is providing half the cost of the new SRO. It's very, very comforting to know that we'll have another officer for working with our students and staff. So again, thank you to the city for supporting that.
Any other discussion?
I'm just going to thank Chris and Ginny, Superintendent Risner, and the rest of the staff for working really hard and kind of moving up the process and being a little more transparent in the budgeting process. We've made great strides this year, and in talking with some of my fellow school board representatives in the Iowa Association of Commerce through the state, they're alone. The timelines always keep getting pushed earlier and earlier. So what used to be April becomes May, and sometimes, becomes March. And one of these days we're going to actually find ourselves in February talking about these things because of the changing requirements in the state. But anyway, I'd like to thank you all for your work on that and moving forward.
I would also say thank you to Jonas for coming and presenting. I think one thing that comes through in this budget that I'm really happy with and the current administration has done is I think it's clear that the administrators are living our priorities. I mean, it was clear on what Jonas presented that those are the priorities we have set for a district are being taken into account in the budget and in the buildings, and that's great.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Rosser. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Passes 6-1. Item 17, student fees for 2019-20 school year.
I move the... You want to go? I move the board approve the proposed 2019-20 fees.
I second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Item 18, meal prices for 2019-20.
I move the board approve the proposed breakfast and lunch prices for the 2019-20 school year.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Perez. Discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Item 19, set the public hearing for sewer easement at Mitchell-Sida, City of Ames.
I move to the board shall set a public hearing on the conveyance of the above described property for May 6, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. in the boardroom located at district offices, and that the secretary is authorized and directed to prepare, publish, and distribute the notice of hearing.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion.
I had a quick question, and I can't find it anymore, but I swear in a previous link to this exhibit, there was an actual contract that was in there. It's no longer there, and I was talking about consideration, and I always thought, I'm not a lawyer, but I always thought you'd have some type of payment or consideration given to both parties, and I didn't see it in this case. But I don't see, it's not there anymore in that link.
I attached the resolution and I attached the document from the city.
Easement. Was there another contract we had with?
There's not a contract, it was just,
And I can talk to you later, Chris. For some reason, I don't see it anymore.
I don't believe on the easements that there's, like, a lot of times it's $1, but I think when it's an easement, even though it's a conveyance of property, it's not like we're...
You don't have to give
I know
consideration.
they're weird, because we still own Mitchell School, it's just that we're giving the city permanent right to go on to that property to do sewer repairs and maintenance. So I attached what I have, I don't have the...
Perfect.
So.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we will vote on roll call.
Deirdre, aye.
Colton, I.
Beerbaum, aye.
Franzen, aye.
Binkin, aye.
Perez, aye.
Rosser, aye.
Passes 7-0. Item 21, personnel report.
I move the board approve the personnel report.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Perez. Discussion?
I want to clarify that I will be voting against this one, but mainly it's because of the assistant principal. And I wish that in the future, if we're gonna approve a budget, I wish that we didn't have the names of the people, because it makes it hard to dissent, right? It makes it hard because it's got nothing to do with the people. The people are awesome, I know all three of them. It's about my philosophical disagreement with that piece. So I would hope that the next time, that we don't spend our money before, before we give chance people to disagree with it.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Perez. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Aye.
Passes 6-1. Item 22, architectural services for small projects agreement amendments.
I move the board approve the amendments to the professional services agreement with Rosen and Mackey Harris Architects for relocating high school shot and discus to Fellows Elementary site, replacing high school stadium press box stair structure, and district office renovation of executive directors.
Second.
Moved by Deerdorf, seconded by Benkin. Discussion.
I have a question for Jerry.
He's up front.
I'm right here.
Oh, there you are. I thought you were still hiding back there.
Thanks for staying up for me here.
No problem, no
Save
problem.
the best for last.
Yeah. What impact will this have on the Pebble budget? Because at least two, I think, of these, I don't recall, obviously, them ever being discussed during a Pebble committee. And so what impact will they have on the budget?
So we're not totally spent out as far as the contingency goes. Right now, we're just going to be able to have to gather the information to see what it's worth. So that's why we get the initial architectural services to come up with the design. We got a scope of work, we can price that out.
Okay.
And we'll be able to take it from there.
Okay, so you don't have any guesstimates yet of what these projects are going to cost?
No.
Okay, but that's what this ball will start
Yes.
rolling so that we can come up with those hard numbers?
Yep, it begins
Okay.
the planning process.
Okay.
How much will it cost for the architecture services for these?
Similar type of thing. We're going on an hourly basis. Typically, small projects don't exceed 10% of the cost for construction. Some of these are, I don't even think we're going to be able to approach that, but even on a small project, the hours add up. So budget 10% for architectural fees, and usually we can come under that.
And Jerry, what's the scope of the district office renovation?
Right now, we're looking at primarily being able to do some renovation. We have open space out where the curriculum area is, so we want to be able to define a couple of offices there. We also looked at the location of the business office, so we're going to kind of take a look at that. I don't want to go and remodel the one space and then reevaluate and say, well, we got to remodel that again and swap the business. So we're going to kind of take a little bit bigger approach to it. I've gotten a couple of initial drawings from the architect just to start out with, and they look like they've done a really good job of keeping the cost or the scope down to a minimum. So I'm kind of encouraged about that.
Okay, thank you.
And then what's the, exactly is happening with the shot and discus? That's going to be, I assume, temporary, correct?
Yeah, currently the shot and discus are going to be occupied on June 3rd when we start construction for the new high school. So we need to be able to have those programs for 3 years somewhere else. And so we found a spot over at Fellows. So initially we're going to look at considering that as a temporary. We really haven't found a good solution for locating the shot and discus on the high school site. So one option would be to take a little bit more of a permanent approach and just plan on leaving it at Fellows. And then the high schools for shot and discus would just walk down the street.
Okay, so we're going to be thinking about that. So it's not going to be, so moving forward, you're going to be asked them to look at something that's permanent as opposed to temporary?
Yes.
Rather than looking at something at the high school that's permanent?
Yes.
Permanent at Fellows. How much space is that?
I guess I'm a little concerned that we're putting a permanent thing at Fellows for that, and for the next 50 years, we're going to have our track kids running back and forth. And I just remember track as a parent, and I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about when my children were in track. They have to run from event to event to event in a pretty short period of time sometimes. And I don't know how somebody would be getting from one event and then up to, shot or discus or whatever when they have to run. I don't see how that would work.
I don't think that's an uncommon situation. I think Drake has their shot and discus separate from their track and field. I don't know that shot putters are necessarily strong runners.
I'm not talking about the shot putters. I'm talking about the discus folks, usually that run other events. And usually at the higher level of a Drake, they specialize in one thing. But our students don't. They run a lot of different events. So I really don't think the long-term thought of having it permanently stay at Fellows makes any sense to me. Somebody can, inform me otherwise, but on the face of it, it doesn't make any sense.
Considering the scope, we're not building walls with doors and windows and a roof. We've got a couple of concrete slabs, and then there's a lot of dirt out there. For discus, it's pretty minimal, but it's a concrete slab. We want to have something stable. I don't have much option for, other than that concrete. So you got the concrete slab, and then on shot put, I think they need about 70 feet. So there's an aggregate field or area in there. For the discus, they've got 200 feet, and they're going to throw to the west, I think it's the west, or the south, I guess, into the field. So there's not a whole lot to it. So permanent versus temporary, there's kind of a fine line between that just because of what the extent is, or just what the needs are for those two ventures.
Okay.
Where would it be?
Pardon?
Where would it be on the site?
Right now we're looking at setting it up just to the west of the playground.
Okay.
And so then the shot put would throw north, and then the discus would throw south into the field.
Where the trees are?
Excuse me?
Where the trees are? No. There's a line of trees on the north side, west. Okay, I'm thinking. Okay. How much space does it take? Will it get in the way for the kids to get more space to play? I don't know. Would it take too much space? I guess that's what I'm asking.
It takes about 70 feet of length for the shot put, and then it widens out to about 88 feet.
Okay.
And then, so then from the sidewalk back, kind of next to the playground, then there would be that aggregate space to receive the shot put. So then there'll be a strip of concrete, and then there's enough for the shot put pads there so they can throw that direction. And then right behind that, go in the other direction to keep it pretty compact. We'd have the discus rings then that would show then, or throw then the opposite direction. So the shot put and discus would be competing kind of with their backs to each other, throwing in the opposite directions.
So it could be something that the kids could use for playtime. I mean, for
Sure.
recess, they could use the imaginative work.
Oh, yeah.
Just do something with it.
Yep.
Or PE.
Or PE, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not getting too crazy or elaborate with it.
All
It's
right.
pretty straight.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jerry on these items? Seeing none, it's been moved by Deardorff, seconded by Benken. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Item 23, Mitchell Elementary Additions and Remodel 2020.
I move the board approve the agreement for architectural services with Roseland Mackey Harris Architects for construction of an addition and renovation of Mitchell Elementary.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion.
Let's go.
Any questions for Jerry? Moved by Rosser, seconded by Beerbaum. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thank you. Items from the board.
I wanted to bring up the presentations that we saw at the high school. We were invited to see a bunch of presentations done by history students. They did these video presentations, and I think there were several of them. And then we were participating in a group discussion afterwards, and our students are amazing. The group that I was sitting with had 12 pages of notes on what they had researched. And then they did like a 10-minute script where they did a video presentation, and then our round table was about economic equity. And it was very enlightening to just sit back and listen to what they had learned. And I have a lot of hope for our future. So I'm really, really excited about that.
Any other comments from the board?
I'd just like to add one more thing. From the conference that I attended, and as a sidebar, I had signed up for this conference for the Iowa Association of School Boards several months ago, actually. And the presentations that were done at the high school, my son was in one of those classes. So when I received the email that we all received inviting us to attend, the teacher, I was like, oh, if it had been on any other day, I could attend. Of course, when my son got home and I broke this sad news to him that I wouldn't be able to attend his presentation, he was quite happy with that. He was like, oh, Dad, don't change the conference. You don't need to go. You come to the presentations. Don't worry about it. So, but at the conference, one of the items that I do want to share in a little more detail is, one of the requirements for the Every Student Succeed Act for every district throughout the country is having a very specific policy on achieving equity and family engagement. And we talk an awful lot about equity, but one of the things that we did at this conference on Tuesday or last Thursday was talk specifically in tying the two together and the family engagement component. We do a lot of wonderful things in our district, from fairs and things that we do with families, but boy, there's a lot of really other great ideas out there that I gathered from this. So I'm going to share it with others, and it's really the concept and really requiring that we're engaging families, and not just on the occasional time, but really engaging them in the curriculum, the learning, and being welcoming to the families in a variety of different times, and not just in the evening, but in the morning sometimes and during the day. So I look forward to sharing some of those things with you later.
Any other things? Items from the district? No. Board planning calendar. Do you have anything on it? I don't have.
Just the board meeting in the next 2 weeks?
Yep, we will have our next meeting in 2 weeks, so that will be on May 6th. We will be looking at, I don't know what I'm trying to think. I think there's something with the high school coming up, right?
We'll be opening
Thank you.
bids for the bonds at
Yeah.
noon that day, and they'll be presented that night.
Yes, thank you. I knew there was something. All righty, I'll entertain a
I
motion.
move we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Your bomb.
Awesome. Okay. I didn't know.